ladies and gentlemen, imagine a place where the air is so crisp. It feels like a breath of fresh air possibility, a place where ancient legends whisper through the towering pines, and where the landscape, carved by time and adorned by nature, tells a story of resilience and renewal. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Highlands of Scotland. Here, amidst the rolling hills and serene lochs, we have discovered something truly unique. It's not just the breathtaking beauty that captivates the soul, but the remarkable potential that lies within this land. Today, we stand at the crossroads of tradition and innovation, ready to harness our rich heritage and stunning natural environment to drive a green revolution. What better way to start this, the world's first Tourism and Renewables Conference, here in the Highlands of Scotland, than by hearing a passionate plea from the younger generation to protect the very thing that brings millions of visitors every year to our environment. Thank you, Innes Morgan, for your inspiring words and for joining us here today from Dunnet Bay Head in Caithness. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be here this morning as Business Development Director for the Cobbs Group of Companies and the founder of Loch Ness Marketing. Cobbs Group of Companies, we have numerous businesses across the Highlands and across Scotland, and as a founding member of the board of Highland Tourism, CIC, and its strategic arm, Highland Renewables. Following 3 years of extensive community consultation work across the Highlands, as well as studying global trends in tourism and learning from international best practice in places in the community and destination development, we wanted to share our journey and the conclusions that we have come to. We are very proud to have invested significant sums of private sector monies to set the Highlands on track to become a world-leading, sustainable destination. Over the past century and a half, the Scottish Highlands have been in decline. In 1851, our population was over 400,000. Now, it is just over half that. And that the peatlands and forests that cover our lands have been degraded, with our ability to protect our planet steadily eroding. By embracing the green revolution at scale, we have the ability to repopulate and enrich our communities and regenerate our degraded peatlands and forests to achieve their full carbon capture and storage potential. Renewables are integral to these solutions and opportunities, and we are proud to stand side by side with them today. Together, we are ready to harness the power and put the Highlands of Scotland on an international stage through innovation and collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome Kate Forbes, MSP for Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch, to the platform.
Well, good morning, and wonderful to be able to see all of you, some very familiar faces. And what is hugely exciting about this conference is that often when I go to tourism-related events, I see some faces, and when I go to energy-related events, I see other faces, and here you all are together, discussing the big opportunities for the Highlands. When I agreed to speak, I was a humble backbencher with slightly more time on my hands to think through what was going on in the Highlands. And we certainly weren't in the midst of an election. So things have changed quite considerably since I imagine all of you RSVP'd to this event. But I thought it was remarkable, whatever else I think about politics, that on day one of the election campaign, where did the Prime Minister go? Now, whatever you think of him, and I clearly have a lot of thoughts during this contest, that says to me that there's something to talk about and to celebrate in the Highlands. And we should think very, very carefully because I believe we are at a crossroads, and the decisions that we are currently taking will determine whether or not, for decades to come, we lament the missed opportunities or celebrate the outcomes. And that is the weight on all of our shoulders. Because I strongly believe, it's in my DNA, it's the thread that runs through my own political outlook, that economic prosperity must have purpose. And equally, there is no solution to income inequalities, to the housing challenges, to the infrastructure frustrations without economic prosperity. The two go hand in hand. And today at this conference, we have the opportunity to think through the opportunities that arise from being on the cusp, if not in the throes, of a renewables revolution, as well as being one of the most successful parts of the UK when it comes to tourism. And that's what gives me enormous optimism as I speak. I've probably discussed these issues with many of you over the last few years. I have a library of books of all the many issues that people raise with me in my capacity as a local representative. You know what they are, so I won't go through them in detail. But when I cast my mind back, let's go 50 years, to what has delivered some of the solutions that mean we're not talking about certain issues now, I see targeted economic interventions that had a social conscience and an understanding of how impactful these interventions could be in the Highlands. We all are well versed, but I'll say it again, in the comments that were made by Willie Ross, the Secretary of State for Scotland, when the Highlands and Islands Development Act was introduced in 1965. I feel that these comments need to be almost emblazoned in all of our minds, because he said this: the Highlander is the man on Scotland's conscience. And that was accompanied by economists saying in the same year that the solution, the economic solution to the Highland problem, as it were, is to induce the movement of labour out of and not the movement of capital into the area. Have that in your mind on a week when the Prime Minister's been in Scotland. Have that in your mind the week after the First Minister of Scotland announced £350 million Sumitomo cable factory in the Highlands. Have that in your mind the week after the Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero celebrated £100 million Haventus investment in Ardersier. Have that in your mind when we talk of all the other developments that are happening in the Highlands. And the growth figures over the last few decades also confirm that. Growth figures show economic activity per capita growing from around 90% of the Scottish figure in 1998, which wasn't all that long ago, to 96% in 2019. And even when you consider the challenges of the pandemic, the economy of the Highlands has closed the gap with the national average over the longer term. That is the context in which we now meet. And my question to you throughout this conference is, so what? I want to unpack a little bit about the opportunity that tourism gives us, some of the challenges too, and the same with renewables. But the big question is, so what? Because the answer in Edinburgh might be, well, it's a sort of decimal point of increase or improvement. In the Highlands, it's different. In the Highlands, it's about sustainable communities. It's about the future of our population. Just this week, we saw some of the census figures, And the census figures in rural, coastal, island communities of Scotland are a big wake-up call. I have a new responsibility for the Gaelic language by design. It's the only job I've ever wanted in government, and now I have it. I'm really chuffed. You all think DFM is a big deal. It's actually responsibility for Gaelic. And for the first time in the Western Isles, we have gone from a majority position of the population speaking Gaelic to a minority position. And that is accompanied by a general downward trend of depopulation and an aging population. It's a real stark warning in terms of the future of these areas. There are a number of schools in my constituency that have either recently closed because there are no young people or are likely to in the coming years. And I know for you, workforce, staffing, matters, and it does. And it matters all the more because of that general trend. So when I ask the question, so what, about all that we can celebrate, the answer must be a sustainable future for the Highlands that is focused on community. Because we need it from an economic perspective, we need it from a social perspective, and indeed we need it from an environmental perspective. And what I believed accelerated those growth figures, what has accelerated overall population increase, cities masking the rural parts, has been these strategic economic interventions. And so engaging with you on a constituency capacity or in a national capacity, that's my big question, the so what. Which brings me to today's conference. Because I think we are far more likely to answer the so what question through collaboration, through being strategic, and by understanding what our shared objectives are. I amn't aware, you can correct me perhaps later, of a conference like this ever happening before in terms of energy and tourism. Often the two are pitted together. And yet in the Highlands, we have this incredible story to tell of what the potential is. Just last year, the figures came out recently for 2023 in terms of international travel, which demonstrated just how strong the recovery in tourism has been since the pandemic. Nights spent and visitor spending all surpassed the levels seen in both 2019 and 2022, which means recovery has clearly surpassed the pre-COVID levels. International visitors, a total of 4 million visits to Scotland. They stayed for 34.4 million nights. I don't know where the rest of them were. And they spent just short of £4 billion. That is a lot of money in the economy, and that is a lot of money which will be spent in the Highland economy. Visits up, number of nights up, visitor spending all up. And even when you take into inflation into account, it is still up. And with those visits, they're attracted by our beautiful scenery, they're attracted by our culture and heritage, and ultimately, they're attracted by the hospitality which is delivered by people. We don't quite yet have AI B&Bs in the Highlands. People, environment, and economic opportunity, they go hand in hand. The same applies when it comes to renewables and energy. We all know that the oil and gas industry has been critical over the last 40 years to sustaining the Highland economy. We all know about the impact it has had on creating communities that may not have existed. We also know, if we go back even further, the impact that hydro had when it came to communities. And I think the visible signs of housing that was built during the 50s and 60s and which is still occupied tells a story about legacy. But that triangle of responsibility is also applied to this new revolution when it comes to renewables, people, environment, and prosperity. This is not an intangible industry that is happening on the periphery of people's minds. It has a direct impact, clearly, on job opportunity, on housing creation, and what the legacy might be in years to come. And I know you'll hear more about some of that later from the excellent lineup of speakers, so I won't unpack that. And so that brings us to this moment and this crossroads that we find ourselves in, where on one hand, there are a lot of challenges in the Highlands and there are a lot of opportunity. Our opportunity here is to ensure that there's a bridge between the difficulties and the challenges of depopulation, pressure on housing, pressure on infrastructure, and so on and so forth, and inequalities, and the opportunity that lies ahead. So as I start to wind up my remarks, the First Minister in the last couple of weeks has set out what he believes are the government's 4 objectives, the things that almost trump everything else, the things that give us a North Star when it comes to decision making, our ultimate priorities. And of course, the difficulty of prioritizing some things is that you can't prioritize everything. Tackling child poverty, economic prosperity, achieving net zero and resilient public services. And I see all of them actually as an economic question, because tackling child poverty in the Highlands cannot be done without secure, well-paid jobs. Investing in resilient public services cannot happen unless we have a thriving economy that raises a revenue. And particularly when it comes to the Highlands, we also need to see a more diverse economy in some places with more private activity. And achieving net zero can't happen without you. It just can't. We cannot get anywhere near our net zero targets without the significant investment that has been made in technology, in the renewables industry, and in decarbonising our other industries. And that's why I'm excited about this initiative, because it sees a future to delivering on these objectives by collaborative working. So where do we go from here? I'm a strong believer, and hopefully this will resonate with you. I'm a strong believer in the fact that strategy and discussion seldom achieves anything. It's actually finding the opportunities for partnership working around a shared objective that gets us working together and achieves that. Any of the successes over the last few decades did not happen by chance. They didn't. Nothing is inevitable. It's within our gift and it is within our grasp. And that is why the burden on us to make this work is very heavy. It is an enormous burden because the future of the Highlands relies on us getting it right. We get it wrong, and I tell you, that library of books I have outlining all the many challenges, we just keep adding to it. And in 50 years' time, a local representative like myself is still talking about income inequality, about the pressure on housing and the pressure on infrastructure. That's what I want to change. The stakes are high, but that means the prize is incredible if we get it right. And so that is my first answer to the so what question. We need to work together and figure out what our shared objective is. The second element to this is that all of our action needs to have a moral question, needs to come with conscience around how this leaves the Highlands better than if we weren't to be working here or investing in the Highlands. It's looking at what is required in a social space. So when you are bringing in huge numbers of workers for these really exciting initiatives, what's the legacy on housing going to be? What is the legacy going to be on leisure facilities? Where is the joint asks to government that are streamlined, strategic, and joined up? And then there's the onus on government too, to make sure it's a lot easier for you to do that. So the second one is legacy. And the third one is, when it comes to working together, we do need a strategy, because otherwise it will continue to be the case that these respective industries are pitted together, whereas actually they should fit together like a hand in glove if we get it right. And so I will draw to a close today by thanking you so much for your support to this initiative, for your attendance at the conference, and for the partnership working that we already enjoy in many cases, and that I look forward to investing in over the coming years. In my mind, I've got the question, so what? And I'd quite like future generations to be able to answer that. Thanks very much.
Kate, our thanks very much for your inspiring keynote speech to open our conference today, and many congratulations on your new position, and very, very good luck and good fortune in it. Ladies and gentlemen, just as Kate leaves the room, our next speaker this morning is Mr. Keith Masson. Keith Masson joined Highlands and Islands Enterprise as head of Net Zero Transition in February 2022, after spending 10 years at the Highland Council, where he helped to establish and grow Carbon Clever and Highland Adapts initiatives. In his current role, Keith is developing a multi-partner approach to support Highlands and Islands enterprises understand, measure, and benefit from net zero and circular economy practice. He is also leading HI's own journey to decarbonisation. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very, very warm welcome to Mr. Keith Masson.
Wow, how to follow that. Good morning. I'm really very grateful for the opportunity to come and speak with you all today. And very briefly, just by way of background, for those of you who don't know me, very much appreciate the introduction, Willie. But yeah, I'm Keith Masson, head of Net Zero Transition at Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And I've been working in the climate change and net zero space for well over a decade now. And believe me, I've got the scars to prove it. By way of example, up until I started working in this in 2013, I had a lush head of hair. And whether that sudden and irreversible hair loss is as a result of working for the climate agenda or for the public sector, or a combination of the two, I'll leave to your interpretation. But my job at Highlands and Islands Enterprise, which is the economic and community development agency for the north of Scotland and all of its islands, my role really is pretty straightforward. I'm trying to put High on a credible pathway to net zero from an operational perspective, and I lead on that work. But almost more importantly, in working through our area teams, I support our businesses and our communities to get on board with the transition to net zero and recognise that this transition shouldn't be seen as a challenge, but as a major opportunity for them. But I'm also trying to help them think about risk and resilience in the context of the climate change that we're seeing, the extreme weather that we're facing increasingly frequently. But for the next 15 minutes, we're diving into the exhilarating world of greenhouse gas emissions and the region's baseline and what that looks like for the Highlands and Islands region. And I know what you're thinking. Friday morning, greenhouse gases, baselines, that sounds about as exciting as watching grass grow. But just for context, hold on to your seats, because the data and what the story tells us is really the secret ingredient for crafting the future economy for our region. And I'll reflect throughout my presentation today on quite a lot of what the Deputy First Minister has touched on already. So buckle up, be ready to be blown away by the surprisingly thrilling world of emissions data. Before all of that, and in terms of context as to why I'm here today, back in 2023, High recognised the need to develop a more robust assessment of our regional emissions, both to progress and inform our own strategic direction, but also to ensure that our work with partners was more targeted and to make sure that we're focusing on the clear areas of need around emissions reduction at a regional level. So as a result of that, EcoSgen were commissioned to undertake work to baseline the greenhouse gas emissions for the whole Highlands and Islands region last year for its constituent local authority areas, where the data allowed a kind of subsectoral analysis, and we also looked at the carbon sequestration and renewable energy potential for the region. And I'll now very briefly summarise the findings from that work. So, Scottish Government have tasked public sector organisations like HI with helping them to achieve the country's net zero target, which is to end Scotland's contribution to climate change no later than 2045. And a big part of that, and hence why the report was produced, involves organisations understanding where, how and why greenhouse gas emissions arise through their operations and through their supply chains. Because fundamentally, you can't manage what you don't measure. So having a thorough understanding, not just of our own operational emissions footprint, but of the region as a whole, is really a critical first step towards an evidence-based collaborative approach to emissions reduction. So in terms of what the study's telling us, at a very high level, the region's greenhouse gas emissions account for 15% of Scotland's total, despite having less than 10% of the population. And although our emissions have declined quite significantly since 2005, we are as a region lagging a bit behind Scotland overall, and I'll touch on the reasons for that shortly. In terms of our emissions, we do have fairly significant sub-regional variation, with emissions being highest for the Highland region and lowest for Argyll and Bute. And again, later slides will help illustrate why that's the case. But if we look at this in terms of our population, our per capita emissions are considerably higher than nationally. And again, sub-regional variation is very important there, with only Argyll and Bute having lower per capita emissions than for Scotland overall. Now, if we look at the emissions profile for the region, and this is effectively our baseline, the top 5 sources of emissions do reflect those of Scotland overall, but the order and the scale is quite different, as you'll note. Now, before getting into this, and I'm sure many of you are already looking at this quizzically, what the heck is LULUCF? LULUCF stands for land use change and forestry. And that sector covers emissions and removals of greenhouse gases which result from direct human-induced land use change and forestry activities. So in very simple terms, carbon is sequestered or stored away by forestry and grassland, while carbon losses occur on existing cropland and natural land that is converted over to cropland or to settlement. So for the Highlands and Islands, almost unsurprisingly, agriculture and LULUCF account for almost half of our total emissions profile, with the other 3 categories of transport, domestic and industry accounting for a similar proportion. And in terms of the national emissions profile, the key takeaway here is that we're making disproportionate contributions to LULUCF and to agriculture, but for the other sources, our contribution is broadly proportionate to our population share. One final point to note on this, the public sector contributes a very small proportion to the overall emissions profile for the region. So despite being legislatively required to support Scottish Government ambition, even if the whole public sector across the region gets to net zero, it's really not going to shift the dial significantly in terms of emissions reduction. So I'm acutely aware that this is a Highland event, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but I think it's really important to understand the sub-regional variation in terms of emissions across the Highlands and Islands. And that's largely because there are so many interdependencies between the regions. And the fundamental reality is that net zero will only be possible by taking a collaborative pan-region approach. Now, I've talked about it already in terms of the sub-regional variation, in terms of considering our emissions profile. Now, for some areas, we see the dominance of particular sectors. For Shetland and the Western Isles, that's LULUCF. For Argyll and Bute, it's agriculture, as well as for Orkney. Highland and Moray have a greater breadth in terms of those subsectoral contributions. For Highland, transport contributes the most, but is fairly closely followed by LULUCF and agriculture. And in Moray, again, almost unsurprisingly, industry is the dominant source, but agriculture isn't terribly far behind. For Argyll and Bute and Moray, though, we also see where positive land management can make a big difference. In those areas, we're seeing forestry already sequestering carbon and helping to balance emissions from other sources and sectors. Now, before getting into the detail on this slide, I think, and Willie touched on this really quite well earlier, I think it's quite easy to think, because we live in such a beautiful part of the world and a naturally green place, that it's a healthy, thriving environment. And to a greater or lesser extent, that is true. But what the data is telling us, that much of our region is already actually suffering quite badly and is quite badly degraded. And that impacts not only the emissions profile of the region, but also from an ecological perspective, the biodiversity of many of our places. And when we look at what's contributing to the carbon emissions within the LULUCF sector in particular, we can really see the positive impact that forestry is currently having in terms of sequestering emissions, but particularly in Argyll and Bute and Highlands, where forestry is storing huge amounts of carbon. Contrary to that, we see that one of the big issues in terms of LULUCF is grassland and wetland, which for the purposes of this study is effectively our peatland. Now in peatlands, year-round waterlogged conditions slow plant decomposition to such an extent that dead plants accumulate to form peat. And that stores the carbon the plants absorb during their lifetimes from the atmosphere within peaty soils, providing a net cooling effect and helping to mitigate the climate crisis. But when peatlands are degraded, dried out, or overexploited, they release huge quantities of carbon emissions into the atmosphere. And it's estimated that damaged peat across the world accounts for 5% of total global emissions. That's massive. Now, the peatland degradation across much of the region means that it is a huge contributor to our regional emissions story. And essentially, rather than it being a net sink of carbon, as was the thinking until recent years, it's actually a big net contributor. But with appropriate restoration and re-wetting, that can be turned around and in relatively short order too, compared to how long it takes to sequester a ton of carbon through forestry, for example. Just finally from this slide, I think what's obvious to me is that achieving net zero is going to be much harder for some parts of the region than others. And that's where a much more sophisticated and coordinated regional response is going to be critical. If we now move on to have a look at transport, it's obviously of critical importance to our whole region and to the tourism and renewable sectors in particular. And the baselining data that we undertook and are focusing on today looked at land-based transport, but it also assesses the carbon impact of ferries and aviation. Now, given the remote and rural nature of our region and the challenge of providing frequent and viable public transport in many of our places, it's unsurprising that our residents and our businesses are dependent on road transport to a much greater extent than other parts of Scotland. And it's important to note a key challenge in calculating the emissions impact of transport is the very mobile nature and the production of those emissions. That's compounded by the challenge of identifying transboundary emissions in a really meaningful way. But what we were able to do is build up something of a bottom-up picture using a range of data sources. And from that, we can see that road transport is the dominant source of transport emissions regionally. And emissions from all vehicle types, apart from petrol, rose between 2013 and 2020, reflecting a general move away from petrol towards diesel. Since then, the adoption of hybrid and electric vehicles has obviously gathered pace. And the critical thing there is that if we're going to see a shift in the dial significantly when we do this rebaselining exercise in a few years, the infrastructure to enable a more rapid transition to non-fossil fueled vehicles, whether that's electrification or hydrogen, is going to be absolutely critical. And there are a range of initiatives underway across the region to decarbonise some modes of transport. A couple of examples, the ferries replacement programme and work being done on the sustainable aviation test environment in Orkney being key examples. And over and above that, our councils and other public sector bodies are required to green their fleets. And that creates a really significant opportunity to deliver charging infrastructure at key locations across the region. And thanks to the recognition of that by the Highland Council, Murray, Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City Councils, Transport Scotland awarded £7 million back in January to help deliver a commercially viable and layered approach to EV charging in urban and rural locations right across the north of Scotland. And that, to me, screams of the power of collaboration and aggregated data in action. Now, onto something that touches us all, and one of the key challenges and opportunities of the coming decades. The inescapable conclusion is that reducing the emissions we generate from running our homes and our businesses is going to be a huge challenge for the Highlands and Islands. But for the purposes of this study, we assessed the two primary sources of energy used in residential properties, electricity and fossil fuels for heat. Now, whilst our domestic emissions are proportionate to our share of Scotland's dwellings, we're going to have a harder job than the rest of Scotland to bring our homes up to an appropriate energy efficiency standard. Currently, only about a quarter of our dwellings have an EPC rating of C or above, compared to 2/5 nationally. And there are a few different factors which drive that, including the age, construction, and nature of the housing stock. We also have a much greater reliance on non-gas fossil fuels, such as oil and coal, for heating, and a higher proportion of our properties are in very severe exposure zones, which makes it it takes more energy to heat our homes fundamentally. And that's partly why we have higher levels of fuel poverty within the region. But the overriding message from the analysis is that much of the emissions arising from our homes comes from a dependency on carbon-intensive fossil fuels, and particularly for space heating, but also through our manufacturing and industrial processes. And for many areas, the remoteness from on-grid energy supply and the quality and age of our buildings, whether those are commercial premises or residential dwellings, is a major contributory factor in energy consumption and thus carbon emissions. So for residential dwellings in particular, energy efficiency, insulation, and transition to low-carbon means of heating and lighting is an area of critical focus and a huge opportunity for our businesses if they're moving forward. As an example of that, and again, talking about a challenge before we come to a solution, a big challenge to the financial and greenhouse gas emission savings arriving from energy efficiency is the lack of a local supply chain that can undertake the work. And that's already impacting the ability of households and our businesses to reduce stationary energy use and greenhouse gas emissions, and to benefit from national funding such as that offered by Home Energy Scotland. However, and there's a common theme developing here, that's a largely untapped opportunity within the region. To me, our analysis, coupled with aggregated up household data at a place-based level, starts to paint a really strong picture of what the economic opportunity around clean heat and retrofit looks like within our places. We need to provide confidence to current installers and potential new entrants to the market that there really is a 15 to 20-year pipeline of work here that is just waiting to be realised. Now, as we've already seen, I won't dwell on this slide too long, at the moment our land use is a major source of carbon emissions, but there's a real potential to turn that around. So in very short form, stabilising carbon in solid and dissolved forms reduces its warming effects on the atmosphere, and that process can help to reduce the region's overall carbon footprint. So afforestation and peatland restoration are going to be critical if the region is going to achieve its net zero ambition. We frankly won't get there if we don't do this well. So we're going to need to sequester more carbon than we produce, largely because some key sectors are going to be very, very difficult to fully abate. I'm nearly done, I promise. I'm conscious of time, and this is my second last slide, but it's a really important one. The potential impact and the scale of renewable energy generation in the region cannot be understated. Without it, national targets, whether they're Scottish or UK targets, are very unlikely to be met. And whilst onshore wind is currently the largest source of renewable energy, offshore wind is expected to increase to a far greater scale than other technologies. However, we are expecting significant increases in generation and supply and storage capacity across nearly all renewable energy technologies over the coming years. And if all the current pipeline activity is realised, capacity in the region would increase more than fourfold, with growth in all parts of the Highlands and Islands region. And recognising the natural competitive advantage for the Highlands and Islands, the creation of renewable energy schemes cuts across a range of regional and national policy objectives. And as we as a country reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, it creates opportunities for jobs within the Highlands and Islands, and we'll be well positioned to benefit from that realignment. So, final slide. The research that I've summarised is extremely detailed, and this has been a very high-level summary. There's an awful lot more information that sits behind it, and when we publish the full report, you'll get to drill into the granular detail of that. But what it does do is provide a really strong baseline in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions for the region and an understanding of where we need to target efforts to really shift the dial. I've tried to summarise the critical next steps as we see them if we're going to see a significant downward trend in emissions when it comes to repeating this exercise in future years. But to try and summarise this in a meaningful way, imagine the region as a vibrant, growing forest. Each tree within that forest represents a different sector, a business or a community working towards the just transition to net zero. So in terms of point one, we need to think of our regional prospectus as the roots that need to reach the national soil. If the roots aren't recognised and nourished, the entire forest risks stunted growth, depriving Scotland of its full potential. For point two, raising awareness is like ensuring each tree understands its role in the forest ecosystem. Only then can they thrive together, sharing sunlight and resources effectively. Collaboration is akin to the forest trees sharing nutrients through their interconnected root systems, and by exchanging best practices, we strengthen the entire ecosystem and accelerate growth. Instilling market confidence is similar to convincing the forest animals that the forest is sustainable and bountiful. That belief encourages more investment in the ecosystem, ensuring its long-term viability. Tackling skills and capacity challenges is like training the forest caretakers. We've got to ensure that they have the knowledge and the tools to support the forest's health and growth. Maximising community benefit is akin to ensuring the fruits of the forest are shared fairly amongst all the inhabitants of the forest. And active policy engagement is like ensuring the forest's needs are heard by the larger Environmental Council. Our regional voice must influence national decisions to secure the resources that we need for future growth. So together, if we nurture our forest with those principles, we can ensure a thriving, sustainable future for our region and beyond. And one final point to finish off, and I'm sure I don't need to explain this, from that famous philosopher, Ricky Gervais. A society grows great when old men plant trees, the shade of which they know they'll never sit in. Good people do things for other people. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Absolutely brilliant, Keith. Many, many congratulations on that fascinating study. It's both amazing and alarming statistics as far as the Highlands is concerned, but as we can see, a tremendous and great, great opportunity. Thank you, Keith Masson. Ladies and gentlemen, my next speaker is Miss Yvonne Crook. Yvonne began her career at Highlands and Islands Enterprise before founding View Marketing, a strategic marketing agency. She later delved into brand and destination development in the Highlands of Scotland, notably contributing to especially establishment of the Cairngorms National Park brand and destination strategy, which gained recognition from the United Nations World Tourism Organization. Subsequently, she extended her expertise to destination development across the UK and Europe. Managing Director of Good Highland Food, an event and outside catering company she runs with her husband, Yvonne earned recognition as Highland Food and Drink Ambassador of the Year. She also received acknowledgement as one of the top 100 women in tourism in Scotland. Yvonne assumed the voluntary role of Chair at Highland Tourism CIC, collaborating with a forward-thinking board of directors to spearhead an innovative initiative together. They aim to unite communities across the Highlands through a compelling Highland brand story and sustainability-focused strategy, positioning the region as a global leader in environmental stewardship. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to, I think, is the hardest working lady in tourism in Scotland, Miss Yvonne Crook.
On the 22nd of March 2021, I received an email which read, "I am a 16-year-old boy from the North Highlands who, like you, is incredibly passionate about promoting our region. I am involved in several sustainable tourism development organisations that have helped me shape my views. I, like you, have taken a view that the Highlands needs a collective, holistic brand that brings together all its elements in a cohesive way. I would love to be involved in this exciting project that I am sure will revolutionise the Highlands. Innes Morgan, Dunnet Bay Head." And I've made a mistake. Thank you. Innes, yours was the first email I received following the launch of Highland Tourism CIC. We're incredibly privileged to have you as one of our first ambassadors and to have you here to launch today's event, reminding us just how important the actions we all take now are in protecting our futures and benefiting the next generation. Highland Tourism is a community interest company established in March 2021. It now incorporates Highland Renewables as a strategic arm. Collectively, we believe that we've been presented with a unique opportunity, a perfect alignment of global priorities and local resources that will enable us to develop and position the Highlands of Scotland as a world leader in sustainable development. Our vision started with tourism. The £2 billion industry supports 26,000 jobs across the Highlands and has been a mainstay of our economy for over a century. However, The current model extracts more than it gives, with a huge reliance upon increasing numbers of day visitors with a heavy carbon footprint. The strain this is putting on our communities and infrastructure has driven us to seek a more sustainable model. The rationale for developing tourism is clear. It is widely recognised as the world's fastest growing industry. Last year, 635 million people travelled to a foreign country, making it the world's #1 export earner, with numbers set to double over the next 15 years. However, whilst it brings wealth, its growth needs to be carefully planned so that it feeds economic benefits back into our communities. We saw a need and an exciting opportunity to shift our focus away from ever-increasing numbers of low-spending day visitors and target a growing global market of visitors seeking a deeper, more meaningful connection to the places that they visit. By shifting towards a sustainable approach, we not only make the Highlands more attractive to this market, but we will also ensure that tourism becomes a force for the good in the Highlands, delivering more enriching experiences for our visitors, our communities, and our environment. We also saw a need for strategic planning that balances the needs of the rapidly growing renewable energy sector with those of the tourism industry. A deep-rooted desire to address these challenges and opportunities and to create a sustainable legacy for generations to come inspired a group of business and community leaders to come together in 2021 and take action, investing together as a community interest company. We realised that the single most important thing we could do in the first instance was to create a brand, an identity for the Highlands, one that would combine community pride with community benefit whilst driving transformational change and economic growth. An identity that would provide a strategic advantage in a global marketplace and give more than it takes environmentally. As we embarked on our transformational journey as Highland Tourism CIC in 2021, we recognised the need to establish baseline carbon footprint information so that we could set and share clear ambitions. These have now been gathered, and we are delighted that Keith Masson was able to reveal the results of this work undertaken by HI at today's conference. I am honoured to be here today as the chair of a visionary and ambitious board of directors who are totally committed to the future of the Highlands and leaving a greater legacy for the whole community. They are Vice Chair Sam Fairclough, Managing Director of Cairngorm Brewery, Willie Cameron, Business Development Director of the Cobbs Group of Companies, Charlotte Wright, formerly Chief Executive Officer of Highlands and Islands Enterprise, Stuart McComb of Castle Stuart Golf, Cabot Highlands, Fiona Larg, Chair of Prosper Highlands, and George Baxter of Green Power International. To date, we have invested almost £750,000 of private sector resources to establish and embed Highland Tourism CIC in the community, build a great team of people to drive forward the development of Brand Highlands, studied trends in international tourism development and markets, created the consumer-facing Escape to the Highlands brand and web portal, bringing the community with us, generated wide-reaching PR, undertaken 3 years of community consultation across the Highlands, and earned the title of Ones to Watch from Social Enterprise Scotland. Huge thanks must go to Tomatin Distillery, without whom these achievements would not have been possible. Stephen Bremner and his team at the distillery have been the perfect partners, sharing our vision for community development and sustainability and investing £150,000 to bring our vision for a world-leading sustainable destination and Highland brand to life. Thanks must also go to the 200 ambassadors who have worked with us to shape the vision and strategy for the development of the CIC. They include Kate Forbes, MSP and Deputy First Minister, Callum McPherson, Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport, and Drew Henry, MP. Let's hear what some of them have to say.
The Highlands is an incredible place. It has great resources within it. There's obviously a lot of renewables work going on across the Highlands as well in terms of that. And I think what we're trying to do is to try and say, well, within that, you also have a huge tourism industry within Scotland and especially within the Highlands. And how can you make sure that that benefits local places as well as visitors?
So we're the recipients of community benefit from renewables. What that has done is has led us to be able to deliver a good range of projects and assets. What we've provided is a really good legacy for future generations, and I hope what I feel about where I live and where I work, other people, especially the young generation, can take that forward.
We've invested in Highland Tourism CIC because we identified that there is a need, and we felt that we had a responsibility to support the Highland Tourism Network. As whisky is now the one area that is most popular for attracting people into the area, we wanted to do our bit to put some money back into the tourism industry and to see how we can help develop and support other smaller companies in the area.
I think we've got so much to offer visitors. We're in the most beautiful part of Scotland, the Highlands, and I think it's really important that all the communities have a one-stop shop where they can all come together, share ideas under one vision, one strategy, one partnership agreement, so that we can really work hard to make it the best possible place for ourselves and future generations within the Highlands. And that's the message that we need to get over through Highland Tourism, working in partnership with the Highland Renewables team. This is a very special place that needs to be cared for. And that's my passion for being involved with Highland Tourism and Highland Renewables.
We need to be sustainable in our outlook in everything that we do, and that's where Highland Tourism come in. We can take a real steer from what Highland Tourism are telling us as a small business and implement that to become hopefully the world's leading sustainable destinations.
This led us to look at just what exactly we had to be able to offer the world. An awe-inspiring natural environment, which last year's National Geographic described as one of the best destinations in the world for nature. We are host to more than half of Scotland's SSSIs and 17 of Scotland's national nature reserves. We have a national park and world-class rewilding initiatives. We have world-class golf with one of the biggest investments in Scottish tourism at Cabot Highlands. World-class country sports, food and drink, and whisky experiences. World-class wildlife and events. World-class adventure in world-renowned destinations with a world-renowned cultural heritage. And we had the confidence to set a bold vision for the Highlands to become one of the world's leading sustainable destinations. Fortunately, global trends are on our side. A recent study by the World Tourism and Travel Council revealed that 69% of travellers are actively seeking sustainable travel options, and Booking.com reports that 50% of tourists are prepared to pay more for sustainable options. This conscious tourism market is growing exponentially, and destinations that can demonstrate flawless environmental and ethical credentials and a clear vision for a sustainable future are set to thrive in the new tourism climate. Conscious tourists are looking for experiences that minimise their impact, educate about biodiversity and ecosystems, provide positive cultural experiences, and contribute to local conservation and biodiversity projects and support local communities. And our research revealed that these work perfectly with the values that Highland communities want to see in their visitors. Armed with those insights, we started to build Escape to the Highlands, the consumer-facing brand we will promote to the world. Throughout the brand development process, we involved the community, consulting them on our content, which focused on the iconic features of our destination, our environment, our culture, and our world-class icons, and sharing opportunities for voluntourism. We're grateful for the sponsorship of a number of businesses whose contributions helped to make this happen and who could see the phenomenal potential it has to transform the Highlands as a destination that will attract highly engaged and motivated visitors long into the future. As we developed our brand strategy, working alongside a group of our CIC ambassadors, it dawned on us that there was an even bigger story to build into our brand. A powerful story that would embrace the full scale of the green revolution happening on our doorstep, the potential of our landscapes to capture and store carbon, and the natural forces powering the renewables industry across the Highlands. These were both integral parts of our transformative and compelling sustainable story. By seamlessly integrating sustainable energy generation into the fabric of the Highland experience, we can demonstrate that it's not just about preserving the environment, it's about celebrating the harmony between nature, innovation, and the power of human ingenuity. And that is where our journey with the renewables sector began. Together, we realised the scale of the green revolution that could be achieved in the Highlands. We could create a destination that would not just attract tourists from all over the world, but create an overarching Highland brand that would draw dynamic, talented, and highly motivated people to come here to live, study, work, and invest, working together to address the scourge of depopulation. In August 2023, following 6 months of focus groups, we launched Highland Renewables with the support of Kane Media, Low Carbon, Green Power, and BEVA. This was a world-first marriage of tourism and renewables, the shared vision in a world-leading sustainable destination, and our mission is to develop the Highlands of Scotland brand together, presenting the Highlands as a better place to live, work, visit, study, and invest. The way the renewable sector has embraced this community vision and recognised its transformative potential has been exceptional. We are hugely grateful for the support we have received from the team at Statkraft, which enabled us to undertake a programme of community consultation throughout the Highlands with the support of a very energetic and passionate Kate Forbes in her role as MSP. Since then, we have secured sponsorship from Field, 4EV and RES. Earlier this week, Haventus joined us as a premier sponsor. Today, we are delighted to be able to announce Vattenfall as the latest premier sponsor, stepping up to partner us with and enable us to share a dynamic vision for the Highlands. This model of working with premier partners is vital to enabling us to continue to invest in the development of the CIC in the short term. Our hills and lochs aren't just picturesque scenery, they're the driving force behind our renewable energy sources. This is a message that will attract future visitors that care as deeply about sustainability as we do. I am a very proud resident of Strathdown. The community leadership has given us a heart to our community that did not previously exist, and the most amazing walks that I enjoy on a daily basis. For the conscious traveller, this is exactly their motivation and the types of experiences that they will enjoy. Highland Tourism, CIC and Highland Renewables' intention is to move to a strategic and transformational community benefit fund, one that will provide a more equitable spread of community funds across the whole of the Highlands. We are committed to working with key stakeholders, including the Scottish Government, to enable that to happen. Some of the headlines from this investment strategy include development of the CIC as a vehicle that can drive forward the vision and support a fair and equitable distribution of community benefit funds across the Highlands, a renewables visitor and education centre, initiatives taking us to net zero and beyond, a hospitality academy and education system professionalising the industry, strategic investment in STEM, branding, marketing and positioning the Highlands on an international stage, encouraging world-leading sustainable debate to take place here in the Highlands, innovative housing solutions, community development and support. Over the coming years, when the visitor levy comes into effect, we see this as a major opportunity to develop our infrastructure, and we'll do all we can to support the implementation and to maximise every new opportunity to engage with visitors, sharing our brand message. The concept that the Highlands are not ours, but ours to look after, represents a great opportunity to uniquely differentiate the Highlands. It can form the basis for an additional opt-in environmental payment that our conscious travellers want to contribute once they have been fully engaged and motivated to put something back into our incredible dynamic environment. This is a unique moment in the history of our Highland community development. Backing our ambitious vision and transformational goals with hundreds of millions of pounds of community benefit funds will empower us to achieve the extraordinary. The evolution of the Cairngorms over the past 20 years as a bold, confident environmental destination is a huge inspiration to us. In the words of Grant Moyer, CEO of the National Park, you don't have to be a national park to behave like one. The 100 organisations that feed into the Cairngorms National Park Partnership Plan are inspirational and show just what can happen when everyone unites behind one vision, one mission, and one strategy. Highland Tourism CIC, working in strategic partnership with Highland Renewables, share an ambition to make the Highlands a beacon of hope, an inspiration for communities and policymakers all over the world, enabling them to see what can be achieved when an entire region embraces and drives forward a green revolution.
Yvonne, many, many thanks for that both inspiring and informative delivery here today at this first conference of Tourism and Renewables. And also great thanks to the work that you have done to bring this initiative to this place today. And a huge thanks also to all the ambassadors who were mentioned and our premier partners in helping us, which are pivotal to achieving our goals for HTCIC and Highland Renewables. Many, many thanks. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Alistair Gronbach. Alistair Gronbach is an experienced marketing director who's worked across multiple industries and sectors, including house building, food and drink, retail, sport, and education. With a background in FMCG marketing, he has many years of experience working for large multinational organizations such as Kraft and Heineken, and brand managed many world-famous brands such as Toblerone, Kronenbourg, and Beck's. He has also been a guest lecturer in brand strategy and positioning at Strathclyde University. For 10 years, he was head of marketing at Visit Scotland as it transitioned from the old Scottish Tourist Board. This involved creating a new consumer-focused department, including marketing, PR, research, events, and business tourism, and resulted in big increase in visitor numbers and a new focus on consumer understanding, segmentation, and targeting, as well as winning multiple awards. He is currently Director of External Affairs at Robert Gordon University, as well as running his own consultancy, Brand Thinking Associates, based in the Cairngorms National Park. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mr. Alistair Gronbach.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me. What I'm going to talk to you today about is the Highlands of Scotland as a brand. Now, it already is a brand, and it's a world-famous brand that we're all very familiar with. But my background, which Willie has just explained, is that if you talk about a brand in a structured way, you have a really strong asset that you can use in different ways. So I'm going to talk about two things. First of all, go into some detail in the brand that we all know about, and how we might structure our thinking, because then it becomes an asset that we can use in our communications. And second of all, brand strategy. So basically two things. I've lost my clicker, right. The brand vision Yvonne's spoken about before. So the starting point is a really clear brand vision, and we have one. The next thing is the icons of Scotland as a brand. Now, when people think of Scotland, and everybody in the world has an image of Scotland, I think, and it's the Highlands of Scotland that is that image. Lochs, glens, deer, stags, eagles, all of these things come to mind. The Loch Ness Monster, all of these things are world famous and give us a fantastic starting point for creating any brand. A lot of countries in the world or regions in the world don't have anything to talk about at all. So we have a major asset as a starting point. The different sectors we've talked about, and from that, we have brands that are world famous. And what we need to do now is pull them all together under one umbrella, Highland brand. And the starting point really is the Scotland brand. Now, the Scotland brand itself is world famous. I was involved in a major piece of research that we did at the very start of this when we articulated the Scotland brand. And basically, to people who've never been to Scotland, it's Edinburgh and the Highlands. Those two things resonate in everybody's heads all over the world, really. So that's a fabulous starting point. And the main reason that people come to visit Scotland is the landscape and scenery. It always has been. I think it always will be. And that's the Highlands of Scotland. It's the number one reason for coming to Scotland, miles ahead of anything else. And I think the thing to say about scenery is Ireland has also got nice scenery, but it's rolling and it's green hills, whereas in Scotland, it's rugged, wild, and dramatic. That's the way we describe our scenery, and it gives us a real point of difference. So I think the word dramatic is really important when it comes to talking about our landscapes. The other thing to say up front is, this has been described as an oxymoron. The three things that we're pulling together today, community, tourism, and renewable energy. Now, I didn't know what an oxymoron was. I had to look it up. But it's absolutely true. Those things look like they may not come together, but it's our job, the people in this room, to pull them together in a motivation and inspiring way. And the thing that pulls them all together, I think, is the environment. They're all totally dependent on the environment, and it's our job as a generation, really, to make sure that we look after the environment. So stewardship of the environment is absolutely critical to the Highland brand. Now, I talked about a structured way of thinking. My background is FMCG marketing, which is fast-moving consumer goods marketing, so basically food marketing. I work for Kraft, a huge global organization. And what they're really good at, Kraft, is believing in brands and providing a structured way of thinking about a brand, any brand. Now, for food products, it's more limited. For a country or a destination, there's so many things you can say. And what we're really trying to get to is the heart of the brand, which is these things. Now, if we can find a way of defining these for the Highlands of Scotland brand, then we've got a real structured way of thinking. And the first one is proposition. The proposition is basically, why should I buy you? Or in our case, why should I visit the Highlands of Scotland? In one sentence, a short sentence, not an essay, not a book, a short sentence that gets to your point of difference. The next thing is your brand essence. If you can do it in one word, then that's super positive. Some of the very established brands like Heineken is refreshment, Volkswagen is reliability, Volvo is safety. These brands really believe in brand marketing. They've been doing it for years, and all of their communication stems around one word. I think for a destination, it's practically impossible to do it in one word, but I think we should have a go at trying to get to 2 or 3 words. Positioning is how you relate in people's minds, really. What's in people's minds about your brand already, and how do you make it super positive? And brand personality is literally your tone of voice, really, is what you would use it for in an advertising sense. So that's at the center of your brand, goes right to the core of your brand, and a brand wheel looks like this. Now, it doesn't have to be a brand wheel. Some agencies in particular call it a brand onion because you're peeling away the layers of a brand to get to the center point. What's your point of difference? I used to work on Tobro, and obviously it was a brand triangle. It doesn't matter, the shape doesn't matter, but what you're trying to do is structure your thinking behind it so you get to the essence of your brand in as few words as possible, and it's really powerful going forward if you can do this exercise. Now, we've already done it, so I'm going to show you what I think is the highlights for the Highlands of Scotland brand wheel. This is the starting point. And we need to fill that with motivating and inspiring words. Because the thing about this is it needs to be super positive. It's what's the best things we can say about our brand. The starting point is the top. Now, this is your rational benefits. So it's all the things you would think about. The icons of the brand are right at the top. So it's all about scenery, tartan, castles, whiskey, bagpipes. All of these things are world famous. Most countries in the world would bite your arm off for these icons of the brand, and we've got them in spades. In fact, we've got too many, in essence. On the right-hand side is the product. Now, again, the way to think of this is it's almost like a drop-down menu, and they would be filled with lots and lots of things underneath these titles. But you can see, hopefully you recognize the Scotland brand, the things that are making the Scotland brand famous all over the world. And then over on the left-hand side is your rational benefits. So if this is your product on the right, on the left is your benefits from the product. So it's exploration, adventure, rejuvenation, escapism, all of these fabulous words are words that we can use in our brand communications when it comes to a rational benefit. The next one, moving into the bottom half of the wheel, is a positioning. Positioning is really, it's all about what's in your head. How do you relate to other destinations that fulfill a similar need? Because people already have a concept of Scotland. So how do we make that super positive? The natural wonder of Northern Europe is inspirational, I think, and relates to where we are in the world. And has the word natural in there, which I think is really important. So that's a good positioning. It's also the positioning for Scotland as a whole, and they don't use it. So it's been heavily researched. I was involved in the research, and we know that it's super motivating to people all over the world. So I think we should grab it and use it because it's really about the Highlands. It's not about Scotland as a whole. The next thing is the brand essence. Now, like I said, if you can do it in one word, it's great. Very hard to do. I think in our case, it's about dramatic scenery and landscape, the natural environment, and caring for those things, as well as the cultural heritage and their local communities. So I think those are the three key words for us when it comes to brand essence. Dramatic, natural, caring. Three super strong words. They go bang at the center of the wheel, along with our positioning. So we're off to a good start. The next thing is proposition. Proposition is pretty hard. Why should I buy you, or why should I visit, or why should I invest in one sentence? I think this encapsulates it. An enriching experience in a dramatic natural environment with energy, innovation, and thriving local communities. Now, I think that captures it. This is not a consumer phrase. This is for us to use as a tool, and we might come up with various straplines from that phrase. But this is more enduring. It shouldn't change. It goes at the center of our wheel, and it gives us a real platform to build from when it comes to developing communication messages or ultimately, I guess, advertising. So the final thing to do really is to fill out the bottom of the wheel, the more sort of emotional side of a wheel. So on the right-hand side is, how does the brand make me feel? So when I visit the Highlands of Scotland, how do I feel? Welcome, refreshed, enriched, reinvigorated, really super strong words. And then over on the left-hand side, how does the brand make me look? So this is your brand image. So when you tell people you're going to the Highlands of Scotland for your holiday, you're not going to Benidorm this year, what does it say about you if you're going to the Highlands of Scotland? That you're caring, curious, mindful, cultured, nature-loving, and adventurous. All, again, super positive words. And at the bottom of the wheel are our brand values. So the kind of rules or that we live by, the things that we take really important to us as a brand: innovative, sustainable, community caring, and stewardship. All very worthy. So from that, you can then have the fun part and start developing straplines. And you might have different straplines for different target audiences or different purposes. I think these all use super positive words. The one I like the best, I think, is enriching communities, enriching the Highlands. I think enriching is a really good word that encapsulates what we're about. But like I say, the brand wheel should remain, fairly static. We shouldn't be changing it. And it's an internal tool. It's not really for sharing. You don't want our competitors to see this. This is just for the people in this room, okay? Goes no further. And it's to help us build our communication strategy. That's what we use it for. And that's an example of what we might do. So that's the brand. Now that we've got a brand and we've got it defined and we know what we stand for, what's our brand strategy? What are we going to do with it? I think there's 6 components, and they're very broad. The first one is value. We've got to increase the value of tourism to the Highlands of Scotland. There's a lot of day visitors coming at the moment. You can understand why. You arrive in Edinburgh, it's tempting just to go up to the Highlands for the day. We need to engage with these people and make it clear that they should come back for longer and stay overnight. And I think the way to do that is to try and attract conscious travellers by being really clear about what we stand for, by doing things, by doing activities that makes them want to come back again and again, and then in turn act as ambassadors for the Highlands. The real opportunities for us there. Community groups, DMOs, there's lots of them, some of them in the room today. I think the job for those organisations is to make sure that our visitors have the best possible local experience when they're here. To encourage visitor spread, to go to less well-known areas of Scotland, the hidden gems, if you like, of Scotland, and it's up to us to promote those hidden gems so that people are aware of them and find them. And another aspect for certain parts of Scotland, over-tourism is a problem. Skye in particular, and there's a really good example of Skye, Skye Connect, have got an app that uses real-time data about how busy the different destinations on Skye are. So if you use the app, you can see, for instance, that the Old Man of Storr car park is totally full, there's nowhere to park, and it might suggest you go to the fairy pools instead. So it's really clever, really smart use of technology to deal with over-tourism and improve the experience of the visitor. I think what's important for us is to tell our story. So you've seen the brand, it's about bringing that to life, telling the story, and I think the key component for us is local stories, local people, local experiences. The word local, I think, is absolutely critical, and this is what's going to give us a point of difference versus other websites. For instance, I think the Escape to the Highlands website has started off really well with lots of great content. There's no point in just repeating other websites like Visit Scotland website. We need to define our own website, and I think this is it. It's about local stories. Nobody else can do that as well as we do. So what we need to do is create our story based on the brand, about local experiences, local volunteering opportunities, the rewilding initiatives that are happening all over the country, bringing those to life in a digital way so that people want to participate. We've already got a world first, a rewilding centre at Dundregan, which has got fantastic coverage. Leonardo DiCaprio is very aware of it and has Instagrammed it to his 62 million followers. And it's in the heart of the Highlands, something that is a world first for us. We're really good at visitor centres. This is a renewable energy one, Cruachan, where you can go inside the mountain in a minibus. It's amazing. It's like a James Bond set. And it's been there since 1965, when I went there as a kid. And it's a fabulous experience. So it's not new to renewable energy. I think we need more of them, but we've demonstrated that we're already very good at it. Whisky as well is another sector that's exceptionally good at developing visitor centres. So I think our job, once we have our story, our local story, is to pull it all together on the website, Escape to the Highlands, which is a test site at the moment, but has got lots of fabulous content already. Pull all that together, and local should be our point of difference, I suggest. Next, community hubs. Now, the Strathdearn Community Hub has been heavily publicised already. It's absolutely fabulous. It's one of the very best. This is another one. It's been around for, I think, 20 years. This is the Gale Centre in Gairloch, which has 10 full-time staff and I think 30 volunteers. Imagine if we had a network of these all over the Highlands, a place where we could sell local produce, local food and drink, where people can meet local people, hear about local stories, hear about local conservation projects from the people who are doing them, participate in volunteering when they're on holiday or when they're visiting. And that would be super exciting if we had a network of them across the Highlands. Imagine if they also had sports facilities like Strathdearn does, a covered sports facility where you can play football or have major outdoor events no matter what the weather is. Imagine if we had those scattered all over the Highlands. Now, I mean, Shetland's a good example. Shetland's got 8 leisure centres. It's a legacy of the Sulanvo Oil Centre. They've been there for a number of years now, but they've created a whole trust, I think it's called, which employs lots of people. And the people of Shetland are some of the healthiest in the UK because they've got the facilities combined with terrible weather, I suppose. But Shetland is a case in point, and they're about 30 or 40 years old now, but still going strong. Imagine, it's been mentioned already before in terms of EV charge points. Imagine if we had EV charge points all over the Highlands. I mean, we're some way behind other countries like the Netherlands. Really encouraging to hear about the £7 million investment from Transport Scotland to make this happen. But if we had rapid charge points all over the Highlands, we would be ahead of the game. I think Scotland already is ahead of the game in terms of the UK, but we're some way behind other countries in Europe. Partnerships. We have to work in partnerships. It's absolutely key. I think Kate said it this morning. It's absolutely critical. The first organisation we have to work with is our National Tourist Organisation. And I think what we can do here is package up our stories into bite-sized digital pieces. There might be digital pieces of video or whatever. Tell our stories, give them to Visit Scotland. They can then use their international network to tell the story to the world. It's a much better use of our resources than trying to do it ourselves. But we need to do the work by creating the stories in the first place. Same with volunteerism. We need to package up the opportunities. What are they? Where are they? Package them up in small bite-sized chunks, give them to Visit Scotland, and then we're in control of the brand, because that's quite important. We need to control our own messages when it comes to the Highland brand, tell Visit Scotland how we want to portray them. The next one is, well, renewable energy companies, obviously. Talked about EV charge points. Another thing is apprenticeship and training. I think University of the Highlands and Islands and maybe Robert Gordon even, because I'm there at the moment, there's a big emphasis on transition in terms of energy, in terms of training, going from the oil industry to renewable energies. How do we bring that to life? How do we make sure that our universities are delivering the most up-to-date courses that reflects renewable energy, not oil and gas? And I think it's been mentioned already, housing. I mean, affordable housing is absolutely critical all over the Highlands. There's a number of organisations that are doing fabulous things already in terms of the environment. Most of these organisations are involved with rewilding all over the Highlands. The first one, Green Tourism, is probably one that we should work with. Now, it doesn't matter who we work with, I don't think, but we should probably work with one because this organisation started in Scotland, and it's a way of making sure that the brand is consistent. So when it comes to sustainability, that we're all doing the best practices, no matter what type of business we are. So it might be worth considering because it would give us a consistency. And I think consistency and trust is the essence of a good brand, really. Sector partnerships have been mentioned already. A lot of these sectors are very organised already. We just need to pull them together in a networked way, explore the linkages where they can all work together. And it's been mentioned already, the National Park have done a partnership plan with over 100 different partners. So we need to do the same, I think, for the wider Highlands. Next is really attracting relevant events, not just any events. I think the Mountain Bike World Cup in Fort William is absolutely spot on in terms of the brand. We need to use our brand wheel to make sure that the events that we're trying to attract fit with the brand. Same goes for conferences. I think we should be looking at climate conferences. We should be getting people to come to the Highlands to see what we're doing here, creating a bit of energy ourselves in terms of the dialogue and the way that the discussion's going on a world basis, or other conferences we've had in the past, like the Adventure Travel Trade Association conference, really good fit with the brand as well. And finally, I think research. We need to make sure that we measure our success and we learn from the things that we're doing, and that's a continuous basis. So probably some sort of tracking study over time. So we establish the key measures and we track them over time to see if we're making a difference. So that in one page is what I think our brand strategy should be. 6 different elements to the brand strategy. Quite broad, but it makes us quite focused in terms of what we're doing with the brand. So that's my favourite strapline, enriching communities, enriching the Highlands. And that, I think, is a summary of the Highlands of Scotland brand in 15 minutes. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Alistair. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Alistair. Your brand knowledge is undoubtedly second to none. Your explanation is totally understanding, and your communication is excellent, sir. And you have shown that tourism and renewables can sit and work very much together as far as Brand Highlands is concerned. So thank you very, very much indeed. Alistair Grunbach. We're running a little bit behind schedule, but we'll cut the coffee break to maybe 15, 20 minutes instead of the half hour. The next speaker today was going to be a very good friend of ours, Professor Terry Stevens, but unfortunately he has had to cancel due to doctor's orders, wouldn't let him fly. He's not very well. However, he has sent me a statement to relay to you all. So I'll just go ahead and read that. On behalf of Professor Terry Stevens. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to my very good friend Willie Cameron for relaying my thoughts to you today. I am so sorry that illness has prevented me from being with you for this groundbreaking gathering. International tourism is a dynamic, intensely competitive environment. Since the big interruption, COVID, the tourism industry in the Highlands of Scotland, as elsewhere, has had to face new challenges, embrace new players, accept new responsibilities, and with that comes new opportunities. In 1963, Bob Dylan wrote, "The times they are a-changin'." That sentiment is particularly relevant in today's world. He also reminded us that the winds of change are blowing wild and free, alerting us to a need to do things differently. 60 years on from Dylan's trope and Rachel Carson's demand for environmental action set out in Silent Spring, it seems to me that the collaboration you are celebrating today is, at last, picking up these challenges in the context of tourism. Highlands Tourism and Highland Renewables have now stepped up to the plate, driving a fresh, creative, hybrid business model that is reimagining the future of tourism. Scotland, as with every destination around the world, is hunting for that elusive commodity, the competitive edge. With this innovative partnership between Highlands Tourism and the renewable energy sector, you will meet that goal. As far as I am aware, this is a unique initiative. It is precedent. It is exciting. It is logical. It is hugely relevant. And it will become an international benchmark. The future measures of successful, sustainable tourism development in the Highlands will be founded on the collective efforts to significantly reduce tourism's carbon footprint whilst driving up value creation, profitability, and jobs, enhancing guest satisfaction for your priority target groups, and generating community wealth, making local communities attractive places to live, work, and visit. The collective power contained in the partnership being celebrated today will deliver these outcomes. You are leaders of change. But it has been a long time coming. Indeed, 12 years ago, the Scottish Government announced there is a real opportunity for the renewables and tourism industries to work together. The Independent newspaper a few years ago boldly announced, "Wind farms do not discourage tourists. New research puts to bed the myth, and these installations damage tourism. They can coexist and grow." They do coexist and they do grow. Bigger Economics, a Scottish economics consultancy, have shown that by examining trends in tourism-related employment in the immediate vicinity of wind farms, the analysis found that tourism-related employment in the vicinity of wind farms had outperformed the trend for Scotland as a whole and for the local authority area in which the wind farm was based. But it is more than that. What you are doing here matters. Tourism in the Highlands must make a clear statement about how it is meeting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This partnership is fundamentally important in achieving these outcomes. It is vital because the tourists of tomorrow care. They care about our environment. They care about the places and the communities they visit. They care about sustainability. They will choose to visit destinations that are known for the things that they care about. Indeed, there is a large body of research evidencing growing environmental consciousness among tourists, meaning greater consideration of environmental factors when they are selecting a destination. Recent studies in the Netherlands, Italy, France, Ireland, Germany, and New Zealand have consistently shown that more than 60% of tourists factor in environmental considerations when choosing a destination for a leisure trip. The next 10 to 15 years will be a time of unprecedented experimentation in tourism and rural development, where old formulas no longer hold true, where traditional forms of partnership and collaboration will have to change, and where hybrid solutions created by hybrid thinkers will prove to be winners. This partnership here today is living proof of these new ways of working. Around the world, there are numerous examples of how renewable energy infrastructure generation and transmission installations have developed visitor-related attractions and activities, from visitor centres and exhibitions to walking and cycling routes, festivals and events, to dedicated centres of innovation, exploring the nexus between tourism and renewables. In Scotland, you already have great examples of facilities and amenities that allow tourists to get close to the renewable sector. My challenge to you is to go further, to realise the full potential of collaboration. Why not own the concept and boldly celebrate what you are doing on the international stage? Your next conference should be international in scale and reach in collaboration with the United Nations World Tourism Organization and UNESCO. Why not create a major renewables visitor centre for the Highlands, comparable to the magnificent Kilma House in Bremerhaven, Germany? Perhaps combine this visitor centre with a centre for innovation and education with UHI and others comparable to the wonderful Samso Energy Centre in Denmark. You are leaders of change. As one of the Highland Tourism Ambassadors, I am immensely proud of the leadership and vision of the Board of Directors. I am in awe of the momentum that has been generated with the renewable sector. Together, you have achieved something very special. The partnership is and will become a global benchmark in both sectors. Thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, to continue with the morning session, I'd now like to welcome Mr. Callum McPherson. Callum McPherson, prior to joining the Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport, Callum was with the Robertson Group, latterly in a UK-wide role leading the capital project business. He has also previously worked with the Highlands and Islands enterprise in a number of roles, including area manager for the Murray region, where he led a range of business activities, infrastructure and community development initiatives. And Callum also comes from my area, Glen Urquhart, Drumnadrochit, close to Loch Ness, for those that don't know. Need to get a wee plug in now and again, folks, you know. Right, Callum McPherson, thank you very much indeed. Embracing the Green Revolution.
Well, he just said he had to get a wee plug in. I've been called worse right enough, Willie, but listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. It's also it's always a privilege and a pleasure to come and talk to a room of people like this. Probably know somebody in every table. I've been involved in this part of the world for a long time. I've even got like Russell Fraser, who I went to school with. Oh no, he's been known me for about only 45 years. So listen, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. A lot of what I'm about to talk about is sort of aligned to what's been said today. But quite a few people in the room have said to me they don't really know an awful lot about the Green Freeport. So for some of you, you'll have heard this before. And for those of you who have heard it before, I apologise. But for those of you who haven't heard it before, I'll maybe talk about a little bit about that. Also, I kind of feel qualified to stand here, to be honest with you. I mean, I know it's the Highland thing to say, I don't feel qualified, but I do, because my mum started up and ran a tourism business in Drumnadrochit for decades. I spent many, many hours behind the till and restocking shelves. And then my dad was a civil engineer who had a small business that did hydro schemes. So I suppose I'm from a family that's kind of been dipped in both sides of what it is we're talking about today. and I currently stay in Beaulieu, so kind of aware of the challenges of what's coming and the community dynamic as well. So the image I have behind me is, of course, of the port of Cromarty Firth. Hopefully you can all see that. But what I want to do, forgive me, and again, some of you all have heard me say this before, I really like to look back a little bit before we look forward. There's a huge amount today about looking forward in vision, and that's fantastic. But I think it's important to look back a little bit as well. So if I may, I'll take you back 50 years. Oh, wobbly screen, go back in time. So this is the Cluny Dam. At that point in the 50s and 60s, it was decided post-war that we had to really gear up and do something different. And at that point, there was 54 odd power stations and 78 odd dams built in the area. There was about 12,000 in Scotland working on that, probably about 8 to 10,000 of them in the Highlands. And that made a big impact in the area at the time. My grandfather worked on that dam, and in fact, they lived in the last house as you go to the Cluny Dam that didn't get sunk. So he was kind of glad that he got the job. So, but if you look back at that, it had a massive impact on the community at the time. But to this day, it's probably regarded as one of the most beautiful drives in the world as you go along. So that's kind of where I suppose, and I should say actually on Loch Ness, and I've got my family are from in and around Loch Ness. One of the first ever hydro schemes, as you may or may not know, was feeding the Abbey in Fort Augustus. I think in 1896 or something, the first ever hydro scheme, which fed Fort Augustus Abbey in Loch Ness. So this area has a little bit of a legacy with that side of things. Wind the clock forward, it's estimated that about 40% of the offshore oil and gas infrastructure that's out there now was either made, configured or serviced in the Inner Moray Firth. This is, of course, Nig, with a big oil rig lying on its side. And to this day, that infrastructure, that dry dock that you see behind that still represents one of the biggest dry docks in Europe. At that point, we had 9,500, 10,000 people in this area directly working on those 2 yards, probably another 3,000 or 4,000 working around in the area. And that had a huge, and this is in my lifetime, I'm not that old, but it made a big impact at that time. But probably the way that landed, and I know because I've spoken to a lot of people who were there at the time, talked about a bit of the shock to the communities, the volume of people coming in and what that did. So I think this time we've got an opportunity at the start of what's happening to think a little bit differently about how we do it and how we can help benefit the Highlands in the long term. And for those of you who don't know, the scale of the opportunity is way bigger than what happened then. Way bigger. This is an intergenerational, region-changing opportunity that I believe we all have an obligation to be part of. So ScotWind is part of a number of rounds. Intog is another one where a lot of international, multinational companies have pursued these different licenses that are there, and I'm really pleased to say some of them are in the room today. And by the way, this isn't oil and gas. This is not drowning in cash. These companies have already invested 150, 200 million plus to get licensing, environmental studies, engineering works. So this is a big commitment by a lot of people to try and get this industry off the ground, and credit to them for doing so. But it's going to be transformational, not just in terms of economically, but environmentally. So I've tried digging into this a little bit, but for every gigawatt of offshore wind that's installed, they reckon it'll save between 3 to 6 million tons of CO2 going into the atmosphere every year. Now, I've said 3 to 6, that's a big band. It depends what you compare it with. Is it gas or coal, whatever? But either way, it's a huge contributor to trying to resolve what it is we're doing to the planet right now. And just a small anecdote, if I may, and forgive me, Keith, I'm not an environmental scientist, but what I will tell you is this. I lived in Skye for 8 years, and I remember speaking to some of the old ski-nicks there, and talking to them, and this is in our lifetimes. They said when they were young kids living in the west coast of Scotland, you could hang fish to dry on fences in the long dry summers, and then in the winter, this is in Skye, if you were driving from Struan to Portree, quite often the bus would have to go through 3 foot deep snow. This is not happening. This change is happening in our lifetimes. I fundamentally believe we are responsible for doing this and sorting this for future generations. And that's one of the 2 or 3 big factors which drives me personally, which drives what I think we need to do just now, and what I think should drive us all, quite frankly. In terms of the investment side of it, and these are probably quite conservative for There's Mike and others in the room who'll probably look at this number in terms of what's happening west of Orkney just now and say I'm underestimating it, but there's about 28-30 billion of spend required to get those 20 licenses built out. An estimate is that about 1.4, probably close to £2 billion per project. And because of the way in which the procurement regulations are being voluntarily pursued, there's an estimate of between 40 and 60%, depending on you talk UK or Scotland, in terms of investment having to happen in Scotland. So this is a huge opportunity for Scotland and the UK to actually take hold of this and take an opportunity. But we have a huge shortage in deep quayside, and that's why the Highlands is so well positioned, and why one of the 2 free ports in Scotland was selected up here. And by the way, on that, it's taken 3.5 years to get to where we are to be nominated as a green free port. There are 30 or 40 organisations who spent their own money and their own time, large and small, pursuing this. So I'm really proud to have been appointed as the chief exec to take it to the next stage, and I'll say a little bit more on what it means. Just very briefly, this is one of the test arrays that was built on one of the floating wind. We have fixed wind and floating wind. For this floating one, I just wanted to just make a point. Some of these components traditionally have come from Asia or from elsewhere in the world. This is a mini one. The big ones are going to have either concrete or steel floating structures. These are too big to be dragged across the world. These have to be built in Europe. And be absolutely clear, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of parts of Europe that right now are vigorously trying to get that work away from the Inner Moray Firth and away from us. Esbjerg is currently spending €940 million on expanding. So this isn't just coming here. We have to fight for it and we have to pursue it. But thankfully, in places like Kishorn and in the Inner Moray Firth, we're investing, we're kind of pursuing that to make it happen. So that's the kind of things that are going to be floating offshore. And I think for the perspective of the engineering, it's still very much in its infancy, but we're at the start of a world-class industry that is going to reap benefits for many years to come. And why is it so important? Well, we've heard this a little bit early on, but just to emphasise the point, one of the reasons why we pursued a green free port is we know that at the moment international investment is pouring into green free ports. So in the last week, as was mentioned, in this area we've had between what Aventus are doing at Ardasir, what's happening at Sumitomo near Port of Nig, what's happening at Port of Inverness and Port of Cromarty Firth. We've got about 750-800 million coming in to the area, being spent on infrastructure. And a lot of people have said to me, well, what does it mean for locals? What's the local community benefit? Well, for one, I don't know any civils contractors that are quiet. Does anybody know any? If you do, let me know. Love to know it. Colleagues at Murphy's are here just now, and they're obviously working hard on what they're doing as well. So there's a real opportunity for the area and a real legacy to be left. But the challenge, ladies and gentlemen, is despite the really positive and beautiful place we live in, the quality of life is fantastic. We have got a ticking time bomb, and it's the fact that we keep losing our population. The last census, we lost 3.7% of our working age population. That's a trend that's happened actually since the oil and gas decline. If we just sit back and let this happen, and I've lived in Fort William, I've lived in Skye, and I will live outside Bewley, I can see it happening. It's happened in my generation. If we don't do something to stop that, then in 20 years' time, we'll have a real problem on our hands. And you just have to look at what's happened in economies like Japan to really realise what happens if you don't keep an eye on a declining population. So we have an opportunity to do that, and we have an opportunity to contribute towards the environmental situation. So just to summarise, we've got a big problem, declining population, and the Highlands getting quieter. But it's not very often this happens. We've got some solutions right at hand to solving our environmental challenge, our population challenge, and a growth in renewables in this part of the world. And you don't often get a solution hovering in behind problems. So let's not lose the chance. And just to emphasise that point, and this was done by an eminent economist known as me, so don't look too closely at exactly the numbers, but it's broadly correct. So basically, broadly speaking, when the hydro scheme came and when it was a real spike of work, it was an act of parliament, there were people working, delivered a huge, in the village of Cannock, which many of you will know, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people staying in Nissan huts there. If you look at the photographs, you wouldn't believe it's the same place. But that's the population that came into the Highlands at the time. Now, we still have, and I've left a tail because we still have, lots and lots of people working in the hydro schemes, and it's left a long legacy in this area. Oil and gas came, again, big climb. thousands of people working in the yards. A lot of them were taken in from the Central Belt and left every Friday. Interestingly, I was speaking to Frida at Jacobite. She was just reminding me that it was her father or uncle who started off by running minibuses to Nig, and that's got the legacy that's left in terms of infrastructure and tourism travel in the area. But again, what happened was, round about the end of the oil and gas boom, somebody realised it was cheaper to build rigs in Asia and tow them over slowly, so they started doing, and that's why it dropped off so fast. For this boom, we have an opportunity. It's going to build up slower, and even installing what's planned on the North Sea floating alone is going to take a generation. So this is an opportunity to do something that's going to last for many generations, and I hope and I believe will actually be the kind of thing where, I think Kate Forbes said at the start, I'd really like to get the situation where, when I'm old and grey, I look back and say, actually, that's the point at which we turned in the Highlands and made a long-term difference. So what is the Freeport? Very briefly, I'll start, if you don't mind me, by busting a few myths, because there are some people who love making up facts when they don't have truth at hand. So it's a not-for-profit company. We have no shares, so we don't distribute profit. If we get anything like that, we accumulate it and we use it going forward. On the board, we have the ports and harbours. We have the Highland Council. We have Highlands and Islands Enterprise. We have the University of the Highlands and Islands, who've been really supportive from the word go. And we're going to get some representatives from the community on there as well. All those posts, by the way, are unremunerated. So this is not a line your pockets environment. Apart from our chairman, he gets something. We have 5 main sites. I'm really pleased to see Port of Ardeshir, who were kind of late in the day, but they've been an absolutely massive contribution to what's happening. And I would suggest, no disrespect to any other site as well, but shaping up to be Europe's largest site for that kind of activity, and it's neither wonder they've got the level of attention they have. Port of Inverness, one of our trust ports, along with Port Cromarty Firth, that I have to say are like an anchor to all of this. They're very heavily regulated. They've got a long-term vision, so they've been really important in taking us to the right place. And then we have Port of Nig, we have land beside Port of Nig, and we have also Highland Deep Haven. And just, again, anecdotally, for those of you who are from this part of the world, how many of you have driven past over the last 30, 40, 50 years Highland Deep Haven and said, Technip are doing something in that corner, but the rest of it's just sitting there. This is the first time in half a century when that old US Air Force base is actually going to be used for something that's going to really contribute strongly to the economy of the Highlands. And I think that's to be celebrated. So the way the Green Freeport works is that on the 520 hectares only that we've designated in those sites, and by the way, you can go onto uk.gov and see the exact sites to the inch. On those sites, when somebody comes to invest, they get some tax reliefs around their investment, around their non-domestic rates, and around their land and builder transaction tax. Again, to be clear, because one of the things people say is, well, all of this lost taxes to the area. The non-domestic rates that the Highland Council gives them a holiday on for 5 years is paid by the Scottish Government back to Highland Council and is being used in this area for infrastructure and capacity. So we reckon estimates are between 400 and 500 million over the next 20 years to put back into things like housing, roads, nursery schools, training, and all those things that you would need to allow that economy to grow. So, and for anybody in the room who still doesn't needs more about what the actual Green Freeport is, we've got minute videos on our website now, and once the next few weeks are over, because we've got a bit to do after that, I'm very happy to meet you and talk to you a bit more about what it is. So that's where the Freeport is. And just to give you an idea, this is already Port of Nig, one of the biggest and busiest energy ports in the country. And that's not CGI, that's what's happening there right now, obviously. Some of you will know exactly what's going on there and what the bits are, but let's just say it's, that's kind of, we're going to see a lot more of that in our region going forward. Just behind, on the right-hand side of the picture, is where the new Sumitomo cable factory is going to go. And again, it's engineering jobs, and it's going to be massive for the area. Let's be clear, it's not just about marshalling and assembly for us. We want long-term manufacturing jobs here. They're putting in a £350 million factory. They're not going to keep open for 5 years. This is going to be jobs for generations. And then to the right-hand side of that, which is maybe little known, but Associated British Ports have taken an option on about 60 hectares of land as well. So one of the biggest UK port operators is really looking closely at what they can do in this part of the world as well. So it's really exciting. It's really positive for the area. I couldn't have imagined the amount of success we'd have had in our first 5 or 6 weeks, because it's only 5 or 6 weeks since we actually got tax status on our sites. But this is just the start. And there's Port of Ardseer. I think I've got the better image this time. I'm just looking for Mr. Milne. Yeah, I used an image last time that was, I don't know, again, I think I might have made it up myself, but this is just a sort of articulation of the kind of scale. And just to give you an idea of the scale, this is an industry of huge proportions. The blades you see lined up there are sort of 100 metre plus type blades, and this is a huge area. So, we need very large spaces. And incidentally, it's why across the whole of Europe, this is one of the few places that can actually do this and cope with it. So, we're at the start of our journey. Really, we need to work closely with our partners. I have to say, we've worked really closely with Highland Council and with HIE and others. And I just want to leave this little comment as well. In speaking to people like Aventis and speaking to people like who are Texan-based fund and speaking to the Asian investors who have come in, and it's something we often gurn about how long things take and that. They've said they've worked all over the world. And apart from Texas, this is the best place to do business. Most welcoming, the quickest. So fair play to our public sector partners who make that happen. So we're talking about Europe's largest heavy marine engineering hub. I haven't touched too much just because of time on hydrogen. Hydrogen is going to be a huge part of this story. There are already people in this room who are working really hard at making hydrogen, green hydrogen, a big part of this. And there's already been some great pilot schemes here to happen. We're one of 2 areas in Scotland that received Hydrogen Round 1 funding to do that development. But I think that's going to play a big part in the future going forward. Not least of all because we're going to have so much energy coming off the North Sea, we won't be able to transmit it. So what are we going to do with it? How can we use that green energy and make it a more versatile fuel? So that's coming as well. So listen, I'm going to drift off talking too much about the infrastructure side of things. But I just thought I'd make a couple of slides, and I'm almost there. When we speak, and at the moment in this hotel, and I hope Craig and others wouldn't mind me saying so, they're already very busy, and also, my other hotel colleagues in the room as well. There's been the amount of people coming from abroad in the last 6 to 8 months, just not our normal visitors, but also those coming to this area to understand what's happening here. Because this is a world-beating location now for offshore wind and for renewables, no question. Then they're coming, and I always make a point of conversation of speaking to them and understanding what it is they do and what they like. And they give me the fundamentals of inward investment. They say it's about infrastructure, it's about proximity to market, it's about supply chain, it's about labour supply, and then the conversation nearly always, without any prompting from me, shifts on to golf, whiskey. Really beautiful here, isn't it? Actually, yeah. In fact, I'm taking my family over soon as well because we liked it so much. We're going to take our family back. And for example, we spent last Monday with Japanese colleagues opening the Sumitomo factory. As they cracked open their barrels of sake, they said that they're not allowed to go back home without having some whiskey to take home, or they get sent back. So, this cultural inward migration is not just about work, it's about people coming. And that's why in Inverness, as many of you know, we have a Polish consulate here, because when the Hydro people came, we had thousands and thousands of Polish people coming, and a lot of them stayed. And I think have done a huge benefit to the Highlands. If any of you are a certain vintage, you almost certainly have been taught by Polish driving instructors if you lived in Dingle. I mean, they've infiltrated the community. I know quite a lot of Polish young guys of descent who are excellent shinty players. They could do with more of them. So this is not just about investment cash, it's about people. And I'm utterly convinced that we will see the benefit in that regard as well. And it's not just about attracting people in, it's about retaining people. It's about our young people feeling they can stay in the area and they don't have to leave if they want a career. Or if they do want to leave and have some fun in London or Edinburgh or Paris or wherever, because I get that, I did that. But they need to come back quite soon because this is the right place to be. And also around housing for key workers, and not just in the energy sector, but in all the sectors. How can we allow us to have staff and people coming to this area? So, for example, I know I personify things a lot, and taking my personal example, my sister was a nurse in Rigmore. She left because she couldn't get a house in Inverness. She's in Brisbane now, which is really handy. I go and see her all the time. So just to finish up there, the opportunities I see, particularly from my angle in what's happening in this industry, and how I think that tourism and the renewable energy sector have to be hand in hand, is this. Tourism is a huge part of the Highlands, always has been and always will be. Energy is a huge part of the Highlands, always has been, and really will be. So we can either choose paths to go that way and that way, or we can link up and think how we best cooperate and make the benefit from that. And I think this room's a testimony to the fact that we can be smarter than that. I've already had tons of people saying to me who've come to this area, we want to experience not just Innermurray Firth, but the wider Highlands. Where do we go? What do we see? Tell us the secret places. Tell us the fun places to go. And that's already spreading out. I've already talked about investing in infrastructure for key workers in our industry, but that goes beyond. And just to be clear, I'm not just talking about welders. We're talking about environmental consultants, we're talking about HR people, we're talking about accountants, we're talking about everything that goes around a growing economy, including those people who support those people's leisure time as well. So biodiversity, we're determined, and we've done a baseline study on the areas, on the impact and the current carbon footprint of the Freeport area. And it's our ambition, working really hand in hand with partners in the locations, to see if we can get a situation where we leave a real strong positive legacy in biodiversity and the environmental impact. Because although we're building stuff that takes millions of tons of carbon out of the air, there's no point in doing that in a dirty way, or it just conflicts. We need to do it as well as we can. And pace and scale, ladies and gentlemen, I've said this, and again, apologies for those of you who heard this. When an opportunity comes along, you can sleepwalk into it, or you can grab it. The pace and scale at which we have to hit this is different. We really have to, step up and grab it. And we owe it to future generations. We owe it to the environment, and we owe it to ourselves, because as was quoted at the start of the day, I don't really like being in anybody's conscience as a Highlander. I'd rather be their envy. So let's make that happen. So listen, that's all for me. I'll just before I hand back, the last thing I was to say is profile. The amount of attention, what's happening here today, and indeed what's happening in our industries, is garnering is something else. And I think when you get that profile and that attention nationally and internationally, again, you don't do yourselves any favours unless you capture that opportunity. So in the last week or two, in fact, the last month or two, we've had the Prime Minister up yesterday. I asked him if he wanted an umbrella, and he said, "You're not the first person to say that today." So we've had the First Minister of Scotland, we've had the Deputy First Minister here today, we've had the King, and now I'm handing back to something even more famous, which is Mr. Loch Ness. Willie Cameron.
Yes, indeed, exalted to a much higher profile than I originally came here with. Thank you, Callum. Many thanks, Callum, for your insight for both the future and your knowledge of the history and culture of the industrial Highlands, the backstory, which is quite amazing. I was very pleased that you mentioned the hydroelectric scheme at Loch Ness, which of course was one of the birthplace of commercial hydroelectric at the Abbey at Fort Augustus. And it's said that when the monks played the electric organ at the Abbey in Fort Augustus, the lights in Fort Augustus used to dim. Yes, the Green Freeport, all success with the Green Freeport. And I see Alistair over here from Port of Kishorn, and all success to you on the West Coast too, Alistair. Great projects happening here in the Highlands of Scotland. So we're now on to the Q&A and the panellists, and I'd like to introduce Sarah Bruce. Sarah Bruce is the news editor based in Inverness. Sarah grew up in the Highlands, defected to the Central Belt for a decade, and then realised it was time to go home. Sarah's mission is to produce stories that help, inform, and cover the issues that matter to the communities in the North. She will facilitate the panel. And I'd like to welcome to the stage, first panellist is Mr. Keith Masson, Head of Net Zero Transition Highlands and Islands Enterprise, Mr. George McNeil, Managing Director Retail of Johnsons of Elgin, Mr. Chris O'Brien, Managing Director, Nevis Range Mountain Experience, Mr. Stuart McComb, General Manager, Cabot Highlands, Duncan Bryden, Director, Strathern Community Developments, and Heather Trench, Sustainable Tourism Officer from the Cairngorms National Park Authority. So if you'd all like to come to the stage, and under the guidance of Sarah Bruce, you'll take it from here. Okay, very much obliged.
going to be a bit more relaxed and do this one sitting down, I think. I'm going to say good morning because I can, and it makes it sound like we're still running to time. So good morning and welcome to the first of our panels today. For this first one, we're going to concentrate on the space where tourism and renewables and sustainability meet. So we're heavy on people who work in the tourism world and what needs to happen next in the Highlands to bring these two things together. As Willie said, I'm Sarah Bruce and I'm North News editor with the Press and Journal. So I'm based in Inverness and I live and work in the Highlands now, despite my time away that I try not to talk about. So just to manage expectations, I'm Sarah Bruce. I'm not Fiona Bruce. I'm not related to Fiona Bruce, and I'm not as good as Fiona Bruce. So just bear with me, okay? we will get there, but it's not question time. So my job is, just to give you a quick intro on me, my job's looking after the Highlands and Islands and Moray and a little bit of Argyll. We look after Oban and surrounds as well. For the P&J, for digital and print. And as a result, I think myself and my team truly understand the issues affecting the area. We live here, we live it, we write about it, we speak to people about it every day. So we know that renewables from freeports to wind farms and peatland to pylons affect hundreds of thousands of people, all of us really, but that's the scale of the people it affects. And equally, tourism, Nessie, the NC 500 has become a thing in recent years. The national park, we've got people who work in golf and cashmere whiskey on the panel today, affects the self-same people. It's so much part of our world. So to moderate this great panel where the two come together feels like an exciting place to be today. So I hope you enjoy it. What we'll do first is we'll let everyone introduce themselves so I can stop talking. So we'll just go along the panel. So if you want to start, Keith, for the third time, we'll hear your introduction today, but it's rude not to, so okay. Give us a potted history.
I'll try and be brief, Sarah. Thank you very much, and great to be on the panel today. So yeah, I'm head of Net Zero Transition at Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and just to go into that in a little bit more detail, as I mentioned earlier on, I'm kind of responsible for helping High be on a credible pathway towards net zero. And what that effectively means is making sure that we are decarbonising our operations in line with Scottish Government ambition. So looking at how we operate our buildings, how we travel to and from, and delivering services to our clients and communities across the Highlands and Islands region. And that's, pretty easy, really, in the grand scheme of things. All the technological solutions to enable that to happen are there and available to us. But the more exciting bit is really to make sure that our businesses and our communities right across the region recognise the importance of getting on board with the net zero transition. That is absolutely critical. And we've heard a lot about the macro level opportunity that the region has, and it is absolutely phenomenally exciting. But to me, the big part of my role is to make sure that our SMEs and our micro businesses can also benefit from that transition, because consumer demand is inexorably shifting towards businesses who can be credible in terms of the net zero space, and that's really relevant to the tourism sector. So really pleased to be here.
Thanks. Keith, I'll work away along. Chris?
Sorry, I think we sat in the wrong places and messed up your order. But,
it's okay. I know what you look like now, so it's fine. It's fine.
I'm Chris O'Brien, Managing Director of Nevis Range. And a quick bit of background on me. I was hand-reared in the Central Belt. I've been in Fort William for the last 10 years, and I had 20 years in marketing before taking over at Nevis Range 10 years ago. And in actual fact, I did one of Scotland's very first climate change degrees at Napier University back in the day. But I'll gloss over that because I dropped out to become a stand-up comedian, which clearly did not work out, which is why I'm sitting here today. So a quick bit about what we're up to at Nevis Range. As the leader of a mountain resort, I have direct experience of climate change. Over the last decade, I've watched the snow line retreat 200 metres up the hill. I've watched the average winds move 45 degrees in the last 5 years alone. So the pace of that change is really apparent. And obviously that inspires myself and my team to really take sustainability seriously. I'm proud to say that we're a carbon neutral business that's only one step away from achieving net zero status. And the key to getting to that has been about making everything that is sustainability part of our business culture. And I mean, down to every single employee who works for us, we're talking about sustainability. It informs every decision that we make. And actually, do you know what? It gets kind of fun. And it actually really does help for the revenue side of things as well. We've just built a hotel development, which we built out of upcycled materials. And those who know me have probably seen me say this a million times, but down to the headboards on the bed are made out of old bits of snow fence. So it really can permeate every single part of the business. There's questions that we're asking ourselves now as a business, which are, we've got absurd levels of social media following. You know, we're at 15 million interactions a year. How do we move from being a sales organization into an organization that's actually influence-based? How can we change from a volume-based tourism model to one that's about sustainability and shared values? So these are the big questions we're asking ourselves as a business at the moment, and hopefully we're starting along that journey now. And you know, the other question we should be asking ourselves is, should we really do this race if Red Bull think it's too risky? The answer to that is probably no, but we'll probably give it a shot anyway.
Thank you, Chris. That's great. Stuart?
Hi, Stuart McCollum, General Manager of Cabot Highlands. Some of you will know us as Castle Stuart Golf Links. I also sit on the board of the HTCIC with Yvonne and Willie and formerly Chris. I've got nearly 40 years in golf, which blows my mind when I say that, but 25 of them have been in golf tourism. King's Barns we built in Fife, and now up in Cabot Highlands. I guess we were taken over, some of you know, the Canadian-based company Cabot. They acquired us in August of 2022, and they are making a substantial and significant investment to develop 72 rooms on site to complement our 2 world-class golf courses. This is going to treble our current staff of 50 at the moment, and we're thinking at least 150 will be in the next 2 years. Now, Cabot have a global portfolio of 5 world-class golf resorts. They're in Canada, they're in the US, they're in the Caribbean, and now they're in Scotland. And they are committed to best practice environmental footprint. And that is done through the Audubon Society, and we are currently working towards our accreditation. Now, one of Cabot's great strengths, you probably have see if anybody follows golf, their destination marketing is just throwing huge spotlights on all areas that they're developing. But again, in order to make these resorts sustainable, they do rely on dependable transport links. People have to get here. There's no such thing as virtual tourism. So wouldn't it be fantastic to have some transatlantic flights direct to Inverness? Lofty, yeah, sure. But I think with all that we're hearing today and all the inward investment taking place throughout the Highlands, I don't believe, and we don't believe, there's been a better time to explore this viability. I think the strong collaboration with government, private sector, and industry, I think there is massive potential. And I hope that collaboratively we can get ourselves lobbying further for that A9 and A96 dueling.
Yeah, we'll come back to that, I would think, Stuart. But, yeah, thank you. George?
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
No, you're too late now. No, it's moments past.
George McNeill, Johnsons of Elgin. Very blessed to work in a business that is Scotland's second oldest family business. We're 227 years old this October. We're a business that turns over about £100 million, primarily a textile manufacturing business, based in Elgin and based in Hawick in the Scottish borders. We're very blessed to have the B Corp organisation recently. We also still have the Queen's Award for Sustainability, and we recently got the King's Award for Enterprise. And then just in the first tranche of the King awarding his Royal Warrant, we've been given the Royal Warrant for accessories, knitwear and cloth. So why is that relevant? Why is that relevant to tourism? Our business model also welcomes through our own brand, the Johnsons of Elgin brand, a number of retail units throughout Scotland. And to distill it down a little bit more, the actual site in Elgin welcomes at its peak 200,000 visitors. And they get to tour around the factory. And it's great when they tour around the factory, the majority of which are the tourism business that tours the factory. The average spend in our store doubles after that tour. It's very important that we attract that kind of level of tourism. So that's the fundamental important. It's important that we find that sustainable link between that type of footfall that we are driving and the model we've got, and we'll talk a wee bit more about that. And another side role, I'm also the chairman of the Spirit Speyside Whisky Festival, where we've just completed, yet again, one of the world's biggest whisky festivals. And it was very pleasing to welcome guests from over 39 different countries to come along into Speyside to enjoy some of the best of the whisky world in Speyside. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you, George. Duncan?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Duncan Bryden, and I've been fascinated this morning that so many points chimed with points in my career. I was Innis here 45 years ago, and I pitched up in the Cairngorms, cleaning up bothies and controlling deer. And after an ecology degree and a round the world trip, I rolled up again in the Cairngorms at Rothiemurchus and ran 300,000 visitors there. And we did World Cup mountain bike events before Nevis Range was even conceived, And then I moved to HIE and we set up things like through the Scottish Tourism Environment Initiative, the Green Tourism Scheme. And I'm really pleased that 30 years later, the King's Mills, Where Are You Craig, has got the Gold Award. I think, well done. That's brilliant news. These days, I produce feasibility studies and applications for communities, and I've helped 25 communities buy over 800 square kilometres of land and assets. I think it's really important that communities own and control assets. There's a huge amount of capacity and talent out there. I also chair the Outdoor Access Trust for Scotland. We run the fairy pools on Skye, for example, where social media brought people in their thousands and there was no facilities. And we put them in. We put car parks, we put toilets, we put paths. And now we're trying to do something on the rest of Scotland's mountains, which, as we already heard, are probably Scotland's biggest tourist attraction. They're what drives tourism in the Highlands, our mountains, and we really need to look after them. And then finally, I'm director of the Strathdown Community Developments, which you've seen several images of, an area just south of Inverness, around the Tomatin area between Inverness and Aviemore. And we're already generating 340 megawatts of power from the existing turbines that are installed in the area. And we've got 530 megawatts in scoping. That's over 1 megawatt for every resident in the 650 residents in the community. So we've been working with Community Benefit for the last sort of 10 years. I'm really trying to build a legacy, and I think we'll maybe be talking more about that later on.
Yeah. Thank you, Duncan. And Heather?
Yep, hi everyone. My name's Heather Trench. I'm here from the Cairngorms National Park Authority, and it's great that we've heard so much about the Cairngorms already this morning from so many different speakers. A little bit about me. My background is thoroughly in tourism, like probably most of the tourism people in the room, starting off frontline hospitality as a summer job. In my case, that was on the beautiful Isle of Arran, a rural tourism destination where my family hail from. After graduating, I then sort of drifted into the attraction sector, working in environmental education, sales, marketing, events, that kind of thing. I first moved up here to the Highlands in 2002. At that time, also working for a mountain resort, I came up to work at Cairngorm Mountain when the funicular first opened. And yeah, that was back when the funicular was open, so we'll skip over that quite quickly. So a couple of years later, the Cairngorms was designated as Scotland's second national park. I applied for a short-term job there. It was supposed to be 8 months. And now, alarmingly, that's nearly 20 years ago, and I'm still there. So a little bit about the Cairngorms. I'm going to imagine that almost everyone in the room knows the Cairngorms. But I'm also going to bet that most of you, when you think about it, are thinking of maybe Aviemore, possibly Glenmore, maybe Cairngorm Mountain. In fact, only a third of the national park actually falls within Highland. We have 5 different local authorities. Most of it's actually in Aberdeenshire. We've got bits of Angus, we've got bits of Perth and Kinross, and an area in Murray as well. So what we have there that's really relevant to the discussion today, I think, is this really complex destination with lots of shared challenges across it, but also lots of local differences. And so I think what I can bring to the panel, alongside all these excellent people that are doing great work at the coalface in actual businesses doing actual work, is possibly that sort of overview, this sort of destination perspective on how to bring people together around a vision. Thanks.
Thank you, Heather. That's great. Just for the structure of the rest of it, we are more than happy to take questions from the floor, and very much so would be delighted to. But we have a few starters because obviously people have areas of expertise. So we'll start with a few of my nosy questions, and then if anyone wants to come in, just make yourself known. Okay, there'll be people around in the room. I think we'll maybe come back to you, Chris, first, if that's okay. If maybe talk a little bit about how, you touched on it there and we've been talking about it before, but how maybe even somewhere where you are you have a clicker and you have people coming through the gates, and I guess we've all worked in volume. We think volume means more people, more money spent, generally, more people telling other people about it. But I think you're pursuing something a bit different now, where it's not just about, I guess, bums on seats, people through doors. You talk a little bit more about that?
I wouldn't like to. We love every customer that we have. Yep. And I think there's different ways to look at the volume side of things. And I think, without wanting to use too much of a tagline about it, it's about realizing shared values rather than trying to get the value, if that makes any sense. But there's lots of different ways this can be tackled. I mean, if you think about our direct experience of tourism in the Highlands, we'll be stuck behind coaches going, God, and all that sort of stuff. But actually, how much better is it if the bulk of your visitors are arriving as a group, as opposed to each of them using an individual car? Because we're not there with the EV side yet. So I think what we're trying to get to is conscious travellers who want to travel in the right way to us, because we can do all the work we like at Nevis Range, but we can't decarbonise the journey of the customer to get to us because of our location. So that's where we're really trying to do the work at the moment, is getting those people that, I mean, we've got Steve Dunlop over there. I mean, in the ideal world, we'd have everybody using electric vehicles in the Highlands. That would be absolutely fantastic. But we're not there yet. So it's about group travel and getting people who are conscious travellers, who are willing to donate to carbon offset programs and things like that, to think about their journey. So when we're targeting visitors, it's about the people that we want to come to us, rather than just saying all comers, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and how do you go about that?
With great difficulty, but no.
Sorry.
No, it's actually, this is kind of what I was driving at before. We're in a very fortunate position. I mean, after having the Mountain Bike World Cup for 20 plus years now, we've got an absurdly large social media following. And that's why we're trying to make that transition to be influencers rather than just a sales channel sort of thing. So I think that we've got the opportunity through our social engagement to actually reach the right people with the right messages. And it's kind of a chip away at it strategy to an extent. But if there's more people doing it, if that becomes the common voice from the Highlands through organisations like Highland Tourism, if we've all got that sort of philosophy, then I think we can make that change across the whole Highlands.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think, George, you've had a recent, I'm using the phrase brand journey because you used it to me, so it must be right. But yeah, recently Johnsons have gone on a brand journey that again is looking at your type of customer and how they behave. So I guess you want to tell us a little bit more about that.
I'm happy to share that, and I think I think what's important is to understand the parallel to the story I'm probably trying to articulate, and working with Yvonne on what's the relevance to what we're trying to do here, Scotland, wider picture. So, there's no secret that Johnson Elgin, we are very blessed on the businesses that we manufacture for. Not allowed to necessarily tell the brands that we manufacture for, but if you walk down Bond Street in London, 50% of them have got stock made cashmere product, made in Scotland, made in Moray, made in Elgin, made in Hoyk. We're very blessed to work with those brands. Now, if you look at a brand positioning, and you think of those top couture brands at the top of a quartile, the Johnsons of Elgin brand is probably towards the bottom of that quartile, with the same product being manufactured for ourselves with our own name on it. So we believe that we have got a right to demand more of a premium for our own product. Now, the right for that comes from the DNA of who we are, sitting in community, manufactured in the one place, 100% vertical woolen mill, textile woolen mill, as well as the craftsmen and leadership that we've got there, as well as the rarity of the product that we manufacture. We've got so many ingredients that we believe we can demand a greater premium. So that's a nice way of saying we're putting our prices up. So what you've got to do is work with people like Alistair, who are the expertise in the marketing, to reposition that brand and reposition who we are and why we've got the right to put that price up. Now, we're on that journey at the moment, and we've done it for the last couple of years. And we've got to ask the question is, what does success look like? And what is the link to sustainability? Then we ask the question, what is the link to the Scottish story that we're trying to tell? Now, I'm very happy to share in Chatham House Rule, with God knows how many hundred people in the room, but we measure our business in obviously seasons. We've got a spring-summer season at the moment. We're about 10 weeks into the spring-summer season. So if you go 2 years ago, that spring-summer season probably gave me about 600,000 quid, then 700,000, then 800,000. So my business is going up, which is great. because we're seeing you, and that's a like-for-like business. If I then tell you 2 years ago, that number was from 7,000 units of product, then 6,000 units of product, then 4,700 units of product, 4,700 at a greater price, driving more sales. Now, you think of the sustainability that we're now manufacturing almost 40% less product to take more sales. Now, that's the beauty of the model we're trying to achieve, and we'll still get some way to go to get the margins we need for the sustainability that we bring. Now, when I say the margins we need, that you think you can be forgiven for think I'm talking about profit. Now, the beauty of becoming a B Corp organisation is that we changed our Articles of Association, and now every family member and every director is motivated that we are no longer a for-profit organisation, we are for people, planet and profit equally. So that's the three things we must now focus on. We will make decisions for the planet that will not benefit our profit, and we'll do the same for the people in our business and the people in our communities. So in order to do that, you probably need some profit in order to actually make those decisions. So again, that's another reason why we believe to kind of demand more of a premium that drives more profit allows us to do that. So spend a lot of time with Yvonne. You've then got to ask the question, is Scotland a premium brand? I believe it's a premium brand. I believe we've got some ingredients in there that are phenomenally premium. However, we've still got to be careful that you've got to be accessible without actually everyone going on that journey and 10 bed and breakfasts in here going for 100 quid a night to 200 quid a night because George says the business will get bigger. It's not that kind of model. We've always got to have that sustainable programme where you've got accessibility as well as the premiumisation. And my counsel at the moment in the journey we're on and working with the Alisons and the specialisms is don't be scared of premiumisation. It's not a bad thing. You know, we're not scared of it. We're proud of what we do, and we believe we justify what we do and the price that we're demanding. If you walk down Bond Street and see a scarf in a particular store sitting at 479 quid that we make, and we're selling the one we sell at 179 quid, it shows you the difference in the brand positioning when you get it right. And I hope there's something that from that kind of parallel, it's a quick 2-minute journey that I'm sure Alison and I could dissect over God knows how many weeks with one of your brand wheels on that journey, I think. So hopefully there's something in that people can just get something from.
Yeah, so prices up.
Aye, that's it, in short.
You'd surely have a decent staff discount though, you'll be all right.
I wouldn't be wearing this if I didn't.
Thank you, George, that's great. You touched on, I'm gonna repurpose a word here, but you touched on seasons there. So I'm gonna maybe come to you now, Heather, because I know we were talking about maybe, somebody said earlier, it doesn't have to be a national park to use, I guess, follow the rules or use some of what has been learned from the national park. So, I mean, what do you think could be applied to the Highlands as a whole, to this new branding we're looking at? And we also maybe talk about how there isn't just one season of tourism, which I think probably the national park is a good example of at least looking at. So maybe talk us through a little bit about how that might feed into this new idea.
Yep, happy to do that, Sarah. I'm going to start by waving around a document that's already appeared on screen a few times, thanks to Alistair and Yvonne. This is our National Park Partnership Plan, which has been mentioned quite a few times. And this is a strategy not for the National Park Authority, but for the National Park as a place. So if anyone wants to look, just come and find me afterwards. It looks quite thick, but the words are quite big and there's quite a lot of pictures in it. And I think, as has already been mentioned, the key thing about this is it's not for us, and we've got over 100 different partners all working together, brought together around a common vision and a common purpose. So one of the key things, obviously, within the plan is very much about net zero. So as well as being our partnership plan, we will point to this if somebody asks to see our sustainable tourism plan. If somebody wants to see our carbon action plan, that is, again, the same document. We talk a lot about the race to net zero, and as a national park, we expect certainly to win that race amongst the UK national park family, because we expect to be carbon neutral next year, 2025. And after that, it's about bringing people with us on the journey beyond that. Now, most of that work has been as a result of woodland expansion, peatland restoration, all these sort of nature-based projects. But there's a real opportunity, I think, to involve both local residents, but also visitors as part of that journey as well. What else does the plan say about tourism? We have an ambition to stabilise visitor numbers at peak times. So what we're looking at, and I'm sure this will resonate with many people across the Highlands, is looking for growth at the right time of year and in the right place. And so what we're looking at there is that there will be some priorities that will be true of every community within the national park. So is anyone going to say, oh, I'm fine for visitors in November? Probably not. So seasonality is a bit of an issue everywhere. But also there are some places that have visitor pressures, particularly in the summer season. So sort of Aviemore, Glenmore, and in some areas, what the local community there tells us that they need is about that kind of visitor management. We've heard a bit more about over-tourism, particularly as we've come out of the pandemic. It was very high profile, it was in the news, and a lot of communities feeling sort of slightly overburdened. So in some areas, like Glenmore, the right thing for us to do is about infrastructure, and it's about things like our ranger service and being out there supporting partners on the ground and managing some of those visitor issues. And the community have a real part to play in that as well. So I was really pleased that recently Aviemore and Glenmore Community Trust managed to do a community takeover of the Glenmore Visitor Centre from Forest and Land Scotland. So the community is now at the heart of the decision making and will be able to influence visitor behaviour in that place. Now, there are plenty of other places across the park that have been crying out for visitors, maybe even in the summer months, and I can give a couple of quick examples of those. The first one is the Badenoch area. So this is Kinghusey, Newtonmore, Lag and Dalwhinnie, just down the road from Aviemore, but have always felt quite overshadowed by the large number of visitors that go to Aviemore. But they also have a fantastic cultural heritage offering, and we've talked earlier today about people and people making a visit. So we had all of this fantastic cultural heritage offering, but we weren't great at sharing it with visitors. So we applied for lottery funding for something called the Badenoch Great Place Project, and now the area is branded as Badenoch the Storylands, and it's about connecting the local stories to people. So there's all sorts of projects that have run through that. So there's an app, for example, which now brings to life some of the ruined built heritage in the area, so you can see what it would have looked like originally. Living culture is really important as well. We've now got a series of events called the Storyland Sessions. This is like an old-fashioned ceilidh. It runs sort of regularly throughout the year. Local music, local storytelling, poetry, and so on. And that's a real visitor proposition, but it also brings the community together. So what you have is visitors getting a much more in-depth flavour of a community. Another good example where a community was really struggling was about 10 or 15 years ago in Tomintoul, which is in Glenlivet in the Murray area of the park. And at that time, Visit Scotland were about to close the information centre. The Youth Hostel Association were closing the youth hostel. 2 hotels were about to close down. And Tomintoul is a tiny place and it's very remote. So again, we pulled in lottery funding and did a huge project to really redevelop the area with the community at the heart of it. So the community now are running the local visitor centre. They're running the local hostel. They've built affordable housing so that their young people are staying. And the really, really good bit of that work as well was that they also went for Dark Skies accreditation. So now they are the most northerly and darkest dark sky park in Europe. So that's a real sales pitch, and that brings us also back to seasonality, because of course, when are the skies dark? Not in the summer, not in the Highlands. Yeah. So again, you're getting that
November,
that year-round tourism.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Right, we're speeding up a little bit, I'm afraid. No, not you, but I joked about the time at the start, but the other people have eaten into it. So perhaps if I could just quickly come to the last couple of questions, and we'll maybe go with you, Stuart, first. You touched on how, well, my blunt instrument brain, how more flights to the Highlands would be a better thing for sustainability. Discuss.
Yeah, thank you.
He will. He's got a good answer. It's okay. I'm not really being horrible.
No, I think in our world, you know, the North American market is huge. It's probably 90% of what brings, you know, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds into Scotland every year. Typically, what happens, you'll have a group. They'll just be flying into Edinburgh, Glasgow. They'll then stay in the Central Belt. They might come to the Highlands. If they do, they'll bus up and they'll bus back. So I guess from our standpoint, we're building more courses up here now. So we're on our second course with the world's top architect, Tom Dope, in a bid to try and, you know, attract people to come to the Highlands and stay in the Highlands, as we were discussing earlier, and maybe not do other parts of Scotland. And so, you know, for that to happen and for it to be a sustainable model, if we can somehow get the transatlantic flights into Inverness and out of Inverness, then for us, we think that is a much more sustainable model than, as Keith mentioned in his graph today, you know, the roads side of things are a huge burden on the carbon emissions. So we need to reduce that, and this is one way of trying to do that. But it comes down to, you know, critical mass. You know, at the end of the day, we still need to have people using those flights. It's not just for golf. Interestingly, when we first set up the board of Highland Tourism, I knew that the Cabot acquisition was coming in, and Chris was on the board at that time. And I couldn't tell him, but he was telling me that his number one marketplace in Nevers Range is a Canadian market. And I was like, really? You know, so it further, exaggerated to me that a Toronto or New York flight would be huge given our Canadian acquisition and Canadian company. And furthermore, we do have our CEO has the ear of the CEO in Air Canada, and also has done, papers for tourism in Canada for the government, our CEO. So there is huge credibility, huge, nous and experience. So I left Inverness in 1987, came back in 2006. It had definitely grown up at that point. But if you'd asked 20, 30 years ago if the transatlantic flights were a thing for Inverness, it would have been laughed off the planet.
Yeah.
It probably still is in half this room, I don't know. But at the same time, if you can't dream and you can't think big, what is the point?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, good point. Thank you.
Just to build just a little bit upon what Stuart was saying about the airport side. Yeah, Canada's a massive market for us. I think I've just dropped a microphone or something behind me. It's a massive market for us. I've said to Stuart, if that ambition for the airport was realised, then my business plan would become we open at 9. And it really would be that simple. But the serious point with it is that from all the international visitors that we get, 60% of them are arriving in Heathrow. So let's even forget Edinburgh and Glasgow for a minute. So actually it dramatically reduces carbon by having them come to Inverness in the first place. I think this is essential actually for the growth of the Highlands. I really, really do. And you asked me before about how we go about targeting visitors. Yeah. And one of the things is we look at markets where you've got more of the type of customers that you want to have. Canada is very much one of those type of markets where there's a lot of shared values. And I think most people here who've ever been over to Nova Scotia will absolutely get that point about the shared values that we have with the Canadian market.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Thank you. Duncan, I'd like you to get a little word, probably with your Strathdown hat on, to talk a little bit about, we touched a little bit on, with the national park, the areas that everyone thinks of, and then the areas that are looking for tourism. So I feel there's kind of a parallel with when you were talking about what you've basically done with renewables money that community has been given. So, I mean, how has that worked for Strathdown? Because I know there's a lot of fears about these things and what happens next.
Well, absolutely. I mean, actually, I was convener of the Cairngorms National Park Authority, so I drew on a lot of experience from there. And through teaching the master's program in UHI in tourism, I could bring that to bear into the community. And, enabled by renewable energy community benefit funds, which started about sort of 10 or 12 years ago, flowing into the community, we could match funding that was available from the public sector. So we could match the grant funding that enabled us to avoid loan finance. And then over the last 10 years, we've just gone on and done stuff, through a sort of place-based approach. We've made some mistakes, who hasn't, but essentially we've taken stock, we've planned, we've addressed community infrastructure that was missing. So we've got community space, we've got solar panels, we've got EV chargers, we've got fibre broadband to all the 200 households in the community. We built paths, bike facilities, and we're working on affordable housing because we've tracked the school roll, it's dropping, we've got an ageing community, so we're looking at how do we care for our old people. So it's a very sort of holistic approach. And at the moment we're sitting with about £3 million worth of assets and we have about a £400,000 turnover, something like that. The other critical thing is building capacity. And this is where I think it's really important to reflect on the community benefit that comes in. I know there's some wind farms that are putting it into a foundation. I'm very keen, and we're very keen, that the money comes direct into the community because that allows people in the community to gather the skills to actually manage quite large sums, take decisions, to make sure projects are viable in the long term, to develop their governance. There's so many tales of communities that have There's been blood on the walls where they've argued over this funding coming in. We've tried to avoid that. We've set sound governance in place, and that's absolutely critical. The next stage, I think, with this funding is a long-term community wealth fund so that we can safeguard into the future, and then working with neighbouring communities, because some things can't be delivered at the scale of small rural communities. To run a community shop, you need about 1,000 people. We've only got 700, therefore we draw on the tourism elements to make up the difference. We're working with local businesses, we're working with the Tomatin Distillery, for example. They're about to expand their visitor centre that complements what we offer through our community cafe and shop. We'll see some of their visitors coming through our establishment. We're going to be working with Transport Scotland during the dualling of the A9. Hopefully the contractors will be having some of their meetings in our hub. So we're generating income not just from the community and not just from tourists, but from local businesses and activities. So it's a much more sort of holistic approach that we're looking at. And developers, renewable energy developers are great to work with. We went to them and said, look, can we have all our money in advance rather than just a money coming in every year for the next 25 years? And they said, well, nobody's ever asked us for that before. We had an argument over net present value. They had a figure down here, we had a figure up here. We're not sitting with heather in our ears in this community. We know what it's worth. And within a few weeks, a 5-page contract later, £1 million dropped into our bank account effectively. Now, you'd never get that in the public sector. You'd be multiple committees, multiple lengths of time, and then multiple requirements. They want a few pictures of what you've actually done with that money because they're shedding the constraints on their investment. So we need to be radical, we need to be proactive and get out there and professionalize our community bodies to sit at the same table as the developers who are keen to achieve what we've all heard about this morning. So there's some real opportunities there.
Thank you, Duncan. That's interesting. Right. I'm going to be toughest on you, Keith, sorry, because you got to speak already. So I've got to be tough. So you have 2 minutes to tell us why we shouldn't be scared of net zero, why people shouldn't be scared of net zero.
I can probably do it in 5 seconds.
Okay, go.
Look at your panel. I think, yeah. We've got a suite of businesses, not just here, but across the whole room who've recognised that, doing climate change, doing net zero well is good for business.
Yeah.
And, it really is as simple as that. If you understand the data around what your emissions profile looks like, and I hate, talking ad lib about data, but it is so critical. You need to understand what makes up your footprint. And when you do that and you see the cost implications of that, actually the recognition that every ton of carbon we put up into the atmosphere has an associated cost. So every ton we save has a net saving to your organisation. When you think about it in those terms, it becomes pretty self-evident. Once you've got the information around what your baseline looks like, you can then proactively start to address it.
That was quick. I'm getting one finger going. Go on. You can have the 45 seconds you didn't use. Go on.
I thought the question was good. Why not be scared of net zero? I think the question should be, we should be scared of not getting to net zero.
Okay, yeah, turn it the other way. That's great. Well, thank you very much, folks. We wound up a little faster at the end, but thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed it.
Indeed, and thank the panel. We're just going to have a quick changeover now. I'd like to invite Erica Askeladd. Are you going up to get mic'd? They're all going up to get mic'd up, and I'll introduce the panel when they get mic'd up and return. Very interesting discussion in more ways than one there as far as great examples of climate change and what is happening. I think the story that Chris O'Brien told as far as Nevis Range is concerned is, to say the least, it's pretty scary as far as the wind is concerned and the snow level rising all the time. And that's happened in just a very, very, very short time. Great solutions too. I think the solutions that Duncan Bryden has told us regarding the community of Strathdairn and what they have done with their community benefit has been absolutely first class. And I know I've experienced the whole centre down there, the community centre and everything that they're doing. It's quite amazing. And if you just blow that up as far as the whole of the Highlands is concerned, we can do this in the Highlands with a strategic community benefit fund for all of the Highlands, not just for the small communities that have got to, because everybody is under the disruption of wind turbines, etc., etc. So a strategic community benefit fund would certainly benefit all of the Highlands and benefit the development of all the things that we want to achieve Brand Highlands as far as a destination that to live, work, and play in. Tourism, as we've just seen recently with the statistics coming out from Visit Scotland, as far as the international visitor is concerned, 2019 was probably the best year that we've had in Scotland as far as tourism is concerned. But this last year, international visitors have gone up 15% to Scotland. I don't know what they are like in England, Wales, and Ireland, but certainly as far as Scotland is concerned, the 15% increase in visitors is certainly putting a strain on various different things as far as accommodation. I do believe that last night in Inverness, you couldn't get a hotel bedroom in Inverness last night because we had young Innes here had to move out of Inverness, and Chris, you had to go to Bewley. So we're only in May, folks. You know, it's going to get worse. It's going to get more pressurized, and of course the costs and everything is going up as well. So again, that's got to be addressed. But then we come to the other problems as well of staff shortages. Fraser Campbell and I, who run the Cobbs group of companies, we have got 5, 6, 7 hotels, and getting staff this last year has really been a tremendous strain. But that's staff in all aspects, not just in the hospitality industry. It's in all the other factors as well. That and the old days of you interviewing the staff, they now interview you. And most of them can't work after 4 o'clock. Which is pretty shit, actually. Thanks, George. You know me too well, eh? And of course, this as far as the public sector is concerned, as far as the infrastructure in the Highlands, we have a lot. And this heavy rain we've had over the last couple of days has hidden all the potholes, so we don't see them so much. But by God, they do a hell of a lot of damage to your tyres. So there's a lot of challenges. And then, of course, we've got to think about Generation Z coming up, what they're looking for. And they are much, much more aware as far as technology is concerned. And as Chris was saying, the number of people on their social media. And it's a completely new direction. And the branding, as far as Alistair was saying, is we've really got a lot of challenges one way or the other. And to my mind, having been working with George Baxter for the last 12 years on renewables and having been one of the instigators of Highland Tourism CIC, I think that the only way forward as far as the whole subject is concerned, as far as the Highlands of Scotland, is a total marriage of Highland Renewables and Highland Tourism. And in the words of Van Morrison, which I learnt from my great friend Professor Terry Stevens, I think working together collaboratively, we will take you from the dark end of the street to the bright side of the road. Thank you. Erica. The next panel discussion is on renewables, and I'd like to invite Erica Askland here, Senior Reporter, Energy Voice, great publication of the DC Thomson Group, which I've been reading from day one, which I've told you about.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
Oh, a long time ago.
It is.
You've been on the go a long time.
We have, actually. I know.
I'd like to welcome to the stage the panellists, Mr. George Baxter, Director of Development of Green Power, Mr. Ian Robertson, Head of Development Service of Statkraft UK, Mr. Jonathan Milne, Chief Corporate Affairs Officer of Haventus, Mr. Callum McPherson, Chief Executive, Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport, Christiana Logan, Director of Customers and Stakeholders, SSEN Transmission, and Mr. Steve Dunlop, Chief Executive of 4EV. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a very, very warm welcome.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. As discussed, I'm Erica Askeladd. I'm the senior reporter with Energy Voice. And we are a DC Thomson publication, and our remit is to focus on and chronicle the energy industry and its transition. And that's why we're kind of here today, because the Highlands and Islands is going to be so fundamental to our energy future. Of course we've got to be here. This is the best place to be. So I'm going to shut up though, and I'm going to start this thing for 45 minutes because I'm conscious of the fact that we're standing between all of these people and some lunch. So we're going to make it snappy. Everyone here, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. You have like a minute and a half. Tell us about you and what you're about, and then I'll have some questions. There are, of course, same rules as Sarah suggested. If you have a burning question, just let us know. We'll get to you, but we'll just kind of start the process as we mean to go on. So, George, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, a little bit about me. I work for Green Power International. It's one of Scotland's leading independent energy companies developing wind, solar, and green hydrogen. Prior to that, I was 12 years at SSE and was heavily involved in a lot of the developments in the Highlands for SSE, including in the Great Glen. And I'm also on the board of Highland Tourism and various other things. But primarily, I think my interest in and involvement in what we're doing today actually started with Willie's fingers. Now, it's not as dodgy as it might sound, but when we were developing the Strone-Lairg wind farm, which sits above Fort Augustus, there was all this noise about, tourism is going to be destroyed in the Great Glen, and oh dear. And so I thought, we need to go and see some tourism people in the Great Glen and find out what they thought. So I asked Willie, you must see thousands of tourists all the time, tens of thousands of tourists over your long time involvement in the industry. How many people do tourists raise wind turbines as being a big issue for you and for them and in their visit? And he said, George, you can count the number of tourists that have raised wind turbines with me on the fingers of one hand, and he held his hand up inside his jacket like that. Nobody had raised it as a negative thing with him. And so, that kind of was almost like an epiphany for me, and that made me think, why do we let this conflict or a supposed manufactured conflict continue? So that was some years ago, and the journey that we've been on since then, I think, has been very positive. And we're, I think we need to work together to the same vision about delivering sustainable communities, about delivering the benefits and maximising the benefits from renewable development for the people of the Highlands. And if we have that shared vision, we can accomplish great things.
Ian, welcome.
Thanks, Erica. Everyone's given their backstory, so I'll just join in as well. So I'm Ian, and as well as this job title, Head of Development Services, I'm also the head of our Scottish operations in our Glasgow HQ. But I grew up in the Central Belt in the Forth Valley in the shadow of Long Annet Power Station and the Grangemouth Oil Refinery. And when I started my career in energy 30 odd years ago, the graduate trainees were all taken to Long Annet, the jewel in the crown, a 2.5 gigawatts coal-fired power station back then. What a long way we've come in that generation. It's absolutely fantastic to see the journey we've made in actually quite a short space of time into renewables. And that Falkirk area where I grew up now has wind farms, and believe it or not, it even has tourists. People actually come to visit Falkirk now. Statkraft is Europe's largest renewable energy generator. That's by units of renewable electricity. We now employ 6,000 people in over 20 countries around the world. We are 100% owned by the Norwegian state, which bought its first waterfall, its first water body to create its first hydro station in 1898. So slightly newer than the Fort Augustus one we heard about, which was done first. We now operate over 400 power plants around the world. Our heritage, our DNA is all about Nordic hydro, but we're growing globally in other technologies as well. So in hydro, we're in on and offshore wind, we're in solar, we're in battery storage, we're in innovative grid projects as well, and we're looking at new technologies too, for example, green hydrogen. We're also very active in one of the leading market participants as well in the UK, which is very important, trading electricity and other related commodities as well. We've been in the UK since 2006. We've invested over £1.5 billion so far. We now employ 500 people in the UK, including 50 or so of us in Glasgow, plus people locally around the country as well. We've done some interesting firsts. One of our local projects at Keith is a world first rotating stabiliser project. I won't attempt to explain how it works, but basically it provides a carbon-free stability service for the grid, which used to be provided by thermal power stations, and it's helping the national grid to get towards being able to operate the grid carbon-free by 2025. We also recently acquired the Loch na Carrach pump storage hydro project down in Loch Ness there as well. And if we build that, that will be probably the first of its kind built in Scotland for 50 years as well. So we do try to be a good neighbour in the areas where we operate, and we're a long-term partner as well. We've been around for a long time and will be for a long time to come as well. We've got over 10 live projects in the Highlands area, so we're extremely active here, creating jobs, investment, new access, improving equality and so on as well, the sort of stuff that's been talked about already today. And we're also a relatively new but flourishing partner of UHI as well, doing some initiatives there around skills, education and so on. So there's a really bright future we see together.
Excellent. Funnily enough, I was just visiting the site of a proposed pumped storage hydro scheme, and I think there's a race now to see who comes first. But nevertheless, no pressure. Jonathan, hello.
Hi, Erica, thanks. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Milne. I work for a company called Haventus. Haventus is a fairly new company, certainly a lot newer than Johnsons of Elgin, George. We were set up in 2023 to own and develop Ardersier Port, which will be familiar to lots of you who have either family connections or you maybe even worked there yourselves back in the day. Haventus was set up by a company called Quantum Capital Group, which is a US energy investor with a lot of quite exciting investments in not only responsibly sourced traditional production, but it's got a very, very good decarbonisation energy transition business, including positions in actual offshore wind developers, one called Bluefloat, for example. So Quantum saw the opportunity to buy Ardersier. That's based on very, very strong conviction about the size of the opportunity in offshore wind. You know, the timing of that, we'll wait and see, but over the medium to long term, they've got extremely strong conviction that Scotland is a brilliant place to be. Ardersier Port is the right place to build this type of facility. We're a very, very proud member of Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport. What we're looking to do over the next year is get the port open for business, hopefully in the second half of 2025. Quantum have committed 300 million in equity to support that, and we were lucky enough to announce the support of the Scottish National Investment Bank and UK Infrastructure Bank with a credit facility last week of an additional 100 million. So lots happening on the site. The quay wall's starting to be constructed, lots of activity on site. We'll dredge the harbour channel next year to get to the depths and widths that offshore wind vessels need to get in and out to bring their components in. And then beyond that, we're extremely keen to get assembly and manufacturing on the site at scale, at pace, because that's going to be the big jobs driver for the region. So that's a big focus for the team. But looking forward to the conversation and good to be in the panel.
Very good, thank you. Now, Callum, of course, we've already heard from you, and I thank you ever so much for asking Rishi Sunak about an umbrella. But please, what would you like to
Callum McPherson, Chief Executive of the Freeport. I introduced myself earlier on. I know we're tight for time, so just to say it's really great to be invited to have a conversation, and really good to hear some of the questions from the floor as well.
Great, thank you. Christiana.
Hi. So I'm Christiana Logan. I work with SSEN Transmission, where I look after the interests of our customers. Now, transmission customers for electricity are people like you see here that are connected to that grid, renewables, flexible developers, but some large demand, like distilleries as well. And we are the electricity network owner and operator in the north of Scotland. We're actually the most reliable transmission network in the UK. We're the most northerly network in the EU, including on Shetland now as well. And we have the highest substations above sea level as well, which can come with its own challenges in terms of maintaining that reliability of the system. Over this decade, we're going to be investing £20 billion in expanding and upgrading that electricity network to be able to accommodate all of those connections and unlock all of that economic benefit that we've heard described today. That includes connecting all 3 of the Scottish Islands sets, so Shetland, Orkney and the Western Isles, to the main integrated transmission system for the first time. That's something that we've worked as an organisation towards achieving for over a decade, so it's really exciting for us to see that finally moving forward.
Very good, thank you. And last but not least, Steve.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be here. I'm here as Chief Executive of 4EV, which is Scotland's only private sector charge point operator. That means that we own, we build and invest in EV infrastructure. Alongside that, because I think it is interesting, is that I'm the chairman of Crosswind Development Limited, which is a subsidiary of the Global Infrastructure Partnership, which owns assets across the world. But in Edinburgh, we plan to build a new town in the west of the city. Before taking this job, I ran Scottish Enterprise as Chief Exec for 3 years. Before that, 12 years as Chief Executive of British Waterways, which became Scottish Canals. So a history of working in and around the Highlands and the Great Glen specifically. Before that, I was Director of Regeneration in Newcastle City, which tried to become European Capital of Culture. And kind of underpinning all of these roles has been placemaking, regeneration and economic development. And the thing that has driven me all in every single one of those jobs is the necessity to bring communities together, to bring the public together, the civic, the public, the private, in order to create movements. When those movements are created, nothing can stop them. And I think that's the scale of the opportunity that we have here now.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Well, time to start the chat. So, George Baxter, you see tourism and renewable energy generation working quite closely together. So we know tourists like to know that they're coming somewhere sustainable, and that's a driver of their buying decisions. Is that what the relationship is, or is there more to it than that?
I think it goes much deeper than that. I think it's a bit about what Alistair was talking about earlier with the whole sense of the essence of what the Highlands is. And I think if the natural resources of energy are so huge, the investments are so huge that it's not just a kind of an opportunity for creating the kind of joint approach to that vision of sustainable Highlands. So actually also an obligation on the renewable industry to work with the rest of the sectors in the Highlands, and tourism is obviously one of the most important ones. There's a number of things that are very that I think we bring to the table as renewable industry. We're providing jobs and skills. We're also doing it in remote areas. It's not like a big coal-fired power station in Grangemouth. The renewable energy, by its very nature, is distributed, and so the jobs can be distributed around the north of Caithness, on the islands, into places like Moy. There's a whole opportunity there to really help with the repopulation and create more resilience. It's something Stuart Black once said to me. He's the CEO of HIE, used to be the Director of Planning at the council. He said to me, you know, George, see if you can create 12 jobs up in Melvick. That's equivalent to a Ravenscraig up here, because those 12 jobs will keep the school going, it will keep the shop going, the construction will keep the hotel going. You know, all of the things that we can bring can be distributed far and wide around the geography, and I think that's really important. But there's other things that we are doing which don't really get kind of talked about too much. And that is all the biodiversity obligations upon the developers now is greater than ever, so that whenever we do a development, you always have to demonstrate that nature and wildlife will be improved demonstrably by the development. We've always done that through the EIA process. The Golden Eagle project in the Great Glen is largely funded through renewable developers, and there's a great story to tell there. But it also goes into the whole social fabric of I always use the story of the doctor surgery in Fort Augustus. It unfortunately got burnt down. I'm sure many of you are aware of this. And the people in that area had to either go to Fort William or to Inverness to see a doctor. And there was no funds to rebuild that site. SSE stepped in and contributed a large amount of money to build a doctor surgery with the community. You know, and that's a great story to tell. And there's numerous other opportunities where working together we can make sure that the investments and the benefits from the development are widespread and they're impactful.
Indeed. Okay, great. Well, I think, Ian, you were thinking of maybe telling us a little bit about how the other benefits of your projects, of Statkraft's projects, and what, give us a flavour of that, maybe.
Yeah, well, community benefits we mentioned a number of times today, and just to pick up from George's point there, yeah, we've been active in that for a number of years. I mean, our first project in the Highlands, the Bailey Wind Farm, which we're a co-owner, and that's been going for 10 years now, and is dispersed over £1 million into the local community already as well. And a lot of that has gone into the Caithness Business Fund, which has been used for startups and for business growth and for apprenticeships and so on as well. So again, it's about that, cyclical thing, which not just for projects, but for creating jobs and so on, and helping with the demographics, and doing money's gone in there as well. And I mentioned we've got a double-digit number of projects here as well at the moment, which are early stage, and the amount we'll put into the community in the future is going to be vast. When we acquired the Lochnacarra project, the pump storage project just before Christmas time, the first thing we did before we even went public with that was to come up and meet with the community councils as well and get to know them, and understand what their needs would be, what their concerns were, and how we could work together. And the plan is to be, as I say, a long-term good neighbour with them. In the last year, I think Scottish wind projects alone have put 26 million in benefits into the Scottish economy. 6 or 7 million of that has probably gone into the Highlands because of its proportion there. And if you look at what's in construction and consented and planning now as well, that's going to multiply to multiple tens of millions annually for quite a long time into the future. And I see we're also doing stuff on jobs and so on as well. I mean, my favourite graphic of the day so far is Callum's graph, which he put up earlier on just because it was very easy to understand, and it was very incredibly impactful.
Was that the one with the beautiful green line?
Indeed,
Yeah.
about the jobs, peaks in the past, and then the new rise in jobs, and how that can address some of the main challenges that the Highlands is facing, and how that will hopefully continue into the future as well. The renewable industry, renewable energy is one thing, but it also has a great capacity to renew itself as well with new technology and innovation. At the moment, we're putting up wind farms across the country because that has become currently the lowest cost form of new energy to deploy in this country. In another couple of generations' time, who knows, it might be something else. We might have harnessed the tides finally as well, and Scotland is leading the way on that too. So things are always changing. The landscape is always changing. What we're trying to do here, or for the Highlands, is make sure the Highlands gets a piece of that now and way into the future.
Yeah. we can't forget that there's a cost of living crisis too, isn't there? I mean, this all needs to be affordable, but as you say,
Yeah.
we're in the right sweet spot there too. Great. Jonathan, Ardersier, I have to get up there. I haven't been up there yet since you guys have taken over. When we were discussing, though, it's a sleeping giant. You're waking it up. There's a shortage, we know, of port capacity for this. Again, it was Callum's slide. He saw all those amazing, kind of blobs on the out to sea, which highlight the scale of the opportunity. And we don't have enough ports capacity, so that's why you're here. But how are you going to collaborate to compete to make it stronger?
Yeah, well, the door's always open, Erica. If you ever want to come and see us, you'd be more than welcome. And the UK has lots of fantastic ports. We're a maritime nation, but the ports are doing other things, as well as having to service the needs of offshore renewables. So there's not a shortage of great ports, but if you take a snapshot in time, we would estimate, I think, there's between 200 and 250 acres of space readily available for offshore wind deployment at the moment, from the kind of around the Edinburgh area up to the kind of top of Scotland on the North Sea East Coast. We reckon you need 100 acres roughly to deploy 1 gigawatt of capacity for a project. So it's not all going to come at once, but if you model that, you need a significantly greater amount of port capacity. So the opportunity that we see at Ardersier is as a dedicated port for offshore wind deployment. Ardersier on its own will bring 350 acres of landside space and up to 1.2 kilometres of quay. Ardersier is obviously on the east coast, which is where at the moment the majority of the ScotWind licences are. So it has two big advantages of scale and geographical location. There's other brilliant ports around the coastline. Ali's here today at Kishore. It's a fantastic business, fantastic port. So that takes me into the point about collaborating to compete. And Callum highlighted the level of investment that's going in, in the near continent, places like Esbjerg, the Netherlands, Norway, and I used to work for Maersk. I know how well the Danish business community works with the Danish government to fund opportunities. Norway is exactly the same. It's at once a competitive threat, but it's a really positive challenge actually for ports in the UK and Scotland to have. Ali's involved in the Scottish Offshore Wind Ports Alliance, which was announced in the last 10 days. And that is a way of going to market, not just to capture UK work for UK and Scottish ports. It's a way of going to market to say to the near continent, actually, come and look at the UK ports for your needs, because everyone in Europe is consenting offshore wind now at greater pace, at greater scale, because we can't rely on Putin's gas. So everyone needs to switch on to this. Ports are a massive enabler of offshore renewable deployment at a time when Europe needs energy security. And there's no reason why ports like Kishorn, Ardersier, brilliant ports at Nigg, brilliant ports at Cromarty, brilliant places at Port of Inverness, Leith, really, really well set to compete, to win this work, and the right kind of collaboration. Everyone's running a business, so there's an element of competitive tension, of course. But, the ports are well placed to say, if we're going to capture this work from European markets, we've got to work smart and collaborate together. That just makes perfect sense to me. Good for jobs, good for the area, good for bringing people to the Highlands.
Yeah. So it's like a hymn sheet, basically, you all got now.
Yeah.
Ah, good, very good.
Totally.
Now, Callum, I hadn't have meant to silence you at all earlier, but I thought also, having realised, we were discussing earlier, you were in Drumnadrochit and now you're kind of back at Bewley. What does all this mean to you personally, now that you're here, and kind of fundamental to delivery of this through the Green Freeport?
So it's a really exciting time to be involved, I have to say. Actually, as a few of you know, I quite like watching Shinty. I used to play it and things like that. And I love standing beside locals and having a chat and people who probably don't even know what I do and talking about it. One of the things you get, of course, is people saying, "No, it'll never happen." You say, well, happening. And also, it's what it means for people who live locally as well. Now, there are some challenges in this, I know. But for me, especially small businesses and small supplantiers and people who don't see themselves benefiting from this big thing that's happening, for me, if we can get to the stage, and I think we're on that journey, if we can get to the situation where in a few years' time, I don't know, it's a horrible expression, but the common person in the street or the average small business in the area or the person who's not directly linked into the businesses we're involved in, actually, that's making a difference. Actually, so I'll give you one example. At the moment, and I'll go back to Shinty if you don't mind, I've heard this from a lot of different teams. In the past, there used to be two types of players. There'd be the ones you think would stay in the area and the ones you probably knew were going to leave to go off to uni and college. So I remember Ali, Mr. Ferguson, and he's managed many teams. You might have had a great star player, but you almost knew they were going to leave the area, so you'd kind of have that in your head. And well, now there's definitely a trend in young people saying, I'm glad to see both boys and girls who are playing Shinty now, saying, I don't have to leave the area if I want to get a vocational qualification, or I can actually stay in this area and study and work. And there's lots of companies in this room and other places who will train me up. So that alone for me is just a nugget of how people are starting to see this industry connected to what happens in the day-to-day villages and parts of the Highlands where they can stay and work. And that in turn helps the overall economy and it helps us retain our young people. So those are the wee nuggets that, for me, I'd love to think in 10 years' time, we say, actually, that's made a difference. And it's helping smaller remote businesses, it's helping individuals make decisions, and it's giving them just options.
Really good. Thank you. And Christiana, I was going to ask you some very serious questions about holistic network design and the follow-up exercise and fundraising that is going to enable the delivery of all this infrastructure. But then we started talking about all the other kind of stuff that you're doing that's really kind of making a difference for people that, is relatable, like homes and, kind of giving businesses a crack at opportunities that are happening in the back garden. So tell me about that.
Okay, why don't I try and do both?
Okay, brilliant.
So Callum
holistic network design. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So Callum had that map that had Scotland, all the different sites of offshore wind that are going to look to connect onto our system in the north of Scotland. And we are tasked with trying to connect the first phase of that by 2030. That's massively accelerated on the timeline it usually takes to deliver these kind of connections. So the electricity system operator, who's independent of ourselves as the network owner, went through a design exercise to figure out what's needed to get all that connected. And not just the offshore wind, but also onshore and some of the flexibility projects like pumped storage and that new demand. And they came up with this holistic network design. And we have taken that ask and we've turned that into our Pathway to 2030 projects. This is a combination of onshore transmission infrastructure and offshore subsea links. And we need both, because without both, you don't get stability of the electricity network. So we are currently working to design and develop up all those projects, and we're consulting with local communities as we do that. We're now in our third round of consultation. The biggest things we've heard as we've consulted about these projects are, is there going to be an impact to tourism, and how do we try and mitigate that as far as possible? And more than half of the feedback has been of concerns about nature and the environment. And a bit like was touched on by George earlier, we have a commitment to deliver at least 10% gain in biodiversity from these projects. So all of our projects will actually leave the natural environment better than when we started. And that's things like planting to attract bumblebees that have brought the great yellow bumblebee back to Thurso around our substation. Or it's things like planting native species in partnership with the Perthshire trust that looks to do that and create not just that nature, but also recreational spaces for the local community. As the development of these projects progresses, there is going to be a huge need for us to accommodate staff that are actually building these projects. It's a bit like you touched on with the camps for people to stay in. Now, sometimes what our industry does is it just books up all the hotel space or all the short-term rental accommodation. Now, that has a potential impact to tourism because we would come and then we would go. And then when we go, have we just left a gap, a hole, because the tourists have stopped coming because they couldn't get somewhere to stay. Our objective is to not have that happen. So we've committed to a housing and accommodation legacy project. What that means is we were going to invest in at least 200 permanent properties that can provide accommodation for workers during the build, but then be adopted within local communities to provide affordable housing, particularly in these rural areas with depopulation challenges. It also means looking at building temporary accommodation camps in areas identified working with communities and local authorities, which mean that we're not going to disrupt the tourism by taking over beds that could be used by tourists. Then at the end of that, when we decommission those camps, we could actually leave serviced sites that could be more affordable to develop for future permanent housing. So you've got, again, an enduring legacy benefit. And it's not just housing. Actually, we heard an earlier panel about the airports too. Some of our supply chain are looking at opening up new air routes into Inverness Airport to be able to bring enough staff into these locations to work on these jobs. We're going to have to move a lot of people out to the islands to build the projects there. So again, additional transport capacity to the islands. And that has the potential to extend the season, because if you've got a demand that creates a need for that route, tourists can use that too. So there are numerous ways that the development of these projects can actually create a long-term legacy benefit whilst decarbonising our power system, which initially makes us a more sustainable destination, and delivering energy security that will bring bills down in the long term.
Wow. Okay. So no pressure. You've got to make our airport international.
Yeah.
You've got to build all the housing, and you're saving the bees. That's actually my favorite. Lovely. Thank you. Great. Now, Steve, you've worn many hats. You had a former role at Scottish Canals, and you were the manager of what is probably one of my favorite bits of Highland industrial infrastructure of the 19th century, the Caledonian Canal. So what does that offer us in terms of any lessons for industrial infrastructure that we're seeing being built around us in the 21st century? And you get to plug EV charging points.
Thank you. It was a real privilege joining British Waterways, but I realised within the first few weeks that this was a 250-odd year organisation that for the last 70 years of it, when I joined it, had spent most of its time closing down canals, turning its back on the canals, disinvesting in yesterday's infrastructure. And it wasn't British Waterways that saved the canals of Scotland. It was the civic momentum of the people in places like Maryhill and Glasgow, up in the Highlands, who said, these are our assets, not yours, and you will stop this. And if you don't stop it, then we will stop you. And therefore, that organisation had to change its DNA, its mindset, its outlook, and think about not what are these assets for, because that economy had gone. It had to think, who are these assets for? And therefore, we had to reimagine and repurpose what canals were about. Now, in doing that, it was a very different solution in Glasgow to the one in Edinburgh, and very different to what we needed to do in the Highlands. And what that meant for me was that you had to, if you wanted to make change in a place, you had to understand, a bit like what you're saying, you had to look back to understand the history, to see where you got now, so that that could begin to inform what the future looked like. And that meant you had to invest a lot in people and a lot in time and engagement, because this could no longer be something that you did to communities. It had to be done something you did with and for communities. And therefore, those principles for me were really fundamental. And that is true not just for British waterways and the restoration and renewal and renaissance of canals. It is how do you think about this transition in a just way? How do you take everyone with you through this transition so that people see their place in it and can connect with their place in it? And therefore, for me, what does that mean for EV world? Well, I know that the market is about to open in Scotland because I think the Charge Place Scotland network has been badly delivered. I think it's set us back, and therefore I think there is market failure in Scotland in relation to investment in EV infrastructure, and that is going to have to be corrected. I worry that the type of market intervention will look at the hotspots of where money can be made, and it won't look at the areas where money can't be made today. And therefore, I think there will be a major risk of inequality and a lack of access to this really important infrastructure. Being able to charge a green or have a green mobility should be available to everyone, not just the West End of Glasgow and the West End of Edinburgh or other places. And therefore, for me, it is really critically important that how the public sector sets up the private sector to engage, that this is not just a race for how much they can earn out of this. It is not a contracting arrangement in my mind. It is a long, deep-rooted partnership arrangement. And for me, I would love to see the Highlands comparable with Norway, where if you mentioned range anxiety, no one would know what you were talking about. It is second nature. 80% of the cars are EV. Everything is clean and silent. And you think about what does that look like here today? And we are a long, long way back. And therefore, for me, I want us to be the driving force, pardon the pun. I want us to be the choice, the partner of choice. That when we go into communities, we stay there, we partner with you, we share the risk, we share the upside with you. And we're there forever. And that's why I'm delighted to be backed by the Scottish National Investment Bank, because this is about impact investment. Of course, we have to make money, and we do, and it's a challenge in this industry just now. But for me, this has to be viewed as a long play infrastructure that is rooted in community development, because our tourists of today and tomorrow will expect that of us, and they will go to places where that infrastructure exists, and they will avoid places where it doesn't. So this isn't a nice to have. For me, this is a real fundamental. And the last thing I would say, and all through today, we've talked about collaborating, and that is mission critical. But it is a collaborate to compete, and we need to go beyond. And that's not just us in the room; it's the whole system has to collaborate to compete. And one of my life lessons is that there is no better place in the whole world to collaborate when something goes really badly wrong than in Scotland. So when something is about to collapse and thousands of jobs to be lost and community failure, the system can respond in a heartbeat and do incredible things. And all the rules can be transformed to find a solution. I would love to pick up that energy and that capability and apply it to something that isn't broken, that's about to be created. And I think that's what we have to collectively do just now.
So we need a spirit of collaboration akin to the Blitz, maybe. Great. Any questions out there? Anyone keen to have a go? Oh, we have a lovely mic coming up to you. So if you could tell us your name and ask your question, that'd be lovely. Thank you. Oh,
hello.
There we go. You're working.
Hi, it's Tim DeMenel from Starega. Alistair Grombach said to us earlier on that he took us through the brand wheel, and he suggested the brand. And to me, it appeared to be focused on the sort of past and present strengths for the regions. So, but what about the future strengths? Kate Forbes spoke in her opening address of the Highlands being a percentage point to Edinburgh. Yet the Highlands has some of the world's greatest natural capital resources, which, to Callum's point, could be generating jobs for decades, if not perpetual, around renewable energy. So should we not be looking to promote the Highlands as the UK's clean industry powerhouse?
That's kind of snappy. Oh, yes, please, yes.
I think it's a great shout. So we are already called upon to speak because the Highlands is a green energy powerhouse. So just in March, I was out in Amsterdam talking at a conference for global offshore wind. And what they wanted to hear was our experience, because we are at the forefront of what's happening across the world. So we have a genuine opportunity, as was touched on a couple of times this morning, to position ourselves as that place. And I think if we can do that in tandem with being a sustainable tourism destination, the two will absolutely act as amplifiers of each other. And I think, was it you, Carl, that said about people coming for energy tourism? Was it you that said energy tourism? And I think we're seeing that. We're seeing that already with different people coming to witness what we're doing here. People come and visit our converter stations and our high voltage substations, because that's something that hasn't been done before anywhere in the world. But as was said, they'll come back and they'll visit again to see what else they can see of the Highlands while they're here. So definitely we should use that and amplify that benefit.
And George, you'd like to address that as
yeah,
well?
I mean, it just sparks a thought that I often say this, so sorry for those of you that have heard it too many times. But the Great Glen is Britain's biggest power station. And you add up all of the megawatts and all the proposals and all the all what's existing now, it is the UK's biggest power station of clean, green energy. Yet, tourism is flourishing in the Great Glen. It doesn't have that kind of negative impact. And the developments that have been developed there have been sensitively done with loads and loads of really big benefits. So, I think we need to talk it up, absolutely, and be proud of it and celebrate it, and try and cut through some of the misinformation and the frankly nonsense that's stated about the impact of renewable technology and infrastructure.
Great. And are you involved in the hydrogen project for Storega? Ah, very good. We're looking forward to hearing more about that, of course, as it gets there. Good. And actually, come to think of it, one of my favorite visitor experiences in the Highlands is the Cruachan Power Station. Are you going to be building a visitor centre as well?
Well, one step at a time, but yeah, I mean,
no pressure.
That would be my personal vision. Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited at the fact that Statkraft's going to be delivering a hydro project in Scotland of this nature and of this impact and so on. And this fantastic piece of infrastructure, and it makes perfect intuitive sense to me as well. If we can add on a visitor centre to that, Cruachan's fantastic. My dad took me there. I took my kids there recently. 40 years apart. SSC's visitor centre at Pitlochry is wonderful as well. Scottish Power visitor centre at Whiteley down south of Glasgow is fantastic too. I imagine there's probably not a primary school child in Glasgow that hasn't been there, and it makes perfect sense for every reason we've been talking about today as well, to create something else in the Highlands, and it's a much wider story than just that project to be told as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily just about tourism; it's about telling that story, of the industrial powerhouse and how we do that. So I think there's
the educational piece as well. Not as people passing through, those that live here as well and grow up with it too. Yeah, we renamed the project to Loch na Carrack as well after speaking to the local Gaelic community and so on as well. And there is a little story, a legend that sits behind that, which lent its name. Loch na Carrack will be a new feature on the map that we will build. It will be the upper loch. But there's also a really fantastic sort of bit of Gaelic folklore legend that sits behind that as well, which would also sit alongside a one-day visitor centre that could tell, as I say, many, many stories side by side.
Marvellous. Okay, great. I would like to thank everyone on this panel for joining us, for telling us your thoughts, sharing your insights. I think we'll move on, and we're even that much closer to lunch. So can we thank everyone in the time-honored manner? Thank you. Thank you. There you go. 43 seconds to...
Right, we're just coming to the wind-up of this morning's activities. I trust you found it both interesting, enjoyable, and a way forward as far as Highland Renewables and Highland Tourism is concerned, working with you all. I'd like to invite back to the stage Yvonne Crook to round up relative to today's conversations. Okay?
Thanks, Willie. Can everyone, yeah. Erica, please come and join me. Erica.
Join you, please.
Thank you. I'll kick off. We heard from Kate Forbes this morning about economic prosperity and social conscience. We heard about sustainable communities and repopulation. We heard from Keith that 15% of Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions are in the Highlands, despite 10% of the population. We heard from Alistair about a strong brand proposition, importance of differentiating the Highlands and our local stories. And we've had an idea from the floor about green energy powerhouse to put into the mix. We heard from Terry about being world leaders of change and owning the collaboration and becoming a global benchmark. And we've heard from Callum about huge investment from stakeholders in the Cromarty, Firth Green, Freeport, but how competitive that environment is and how much we need Brand Highlands to be able to strengthen and grow to enable that. I think I find it completely fascinating, actually, and we don't have all the answers, and it's clear there's so much to do here. But what we do know is that our entrepreneurial and ambitious vision that we've created and the people that are here and the stakeholders that are here that can contribute to that is a phenomenal opportunity. And what we must do is take advantage of this situation. Every time I meet a renewable developer, and it's a completely new world for me over the last 18 months, but every time I meet one, they have another innovative idea. And I would say that I think, and I hope I don't regret saying this, but we have been quite a sleepy tourism industry for quite a long time in the Highlands, and this is giving us the fresh motivation that we need and the inspiration and the innovation that we need to be able to drive things forward. So integrating tourism and renewables and the strategic context in which that happens, we don't have all the answers to it, but please, our plea would be, if you feel like you're a stakeholder in the Highlands today in this potential collaboration, please can we fill up this screen with all the brands that want to contribute to it, and please can we create what the Cairngorms National Park have done that seems so simple, to be able to sit with Grant Moore in the National Park and for him to say, this is your answer, and it's obvious that's what we need to be able to do. Erica, I'd like to invite you to add something to that. Sorry, one more thing. I think we take up Terry's challenge because, you know, he is a tourism expert in a global sense. And for him to say our next conference should be within United Nations World Tourism Organization, I take that challenge up.
Yeah,
and well, let's go for it.
Oh, great. I think I mic'd up. So.
And I'm going to do the thank yous.
Okay, very good. I don't need this, do I? Okay. Lovely. I'm going to keep it short. I think we've had a really great summary of just some of the really interesting points that we have discussed today, all of the B's. I'm going to talk to you about that again. But actually, before I came into this room, I was just upstairs actually, but I was reading a report about how if we're going to reach our targets to achieve net zero, that will only happen because of the Highlands and Islands. And actually that was a headline basically to Keith's report, which was in the Press and Journal, which you'll see on there. It's online on the P&J website. It's on the Energy Voice website, which gives that insight of that report a reach in the community across Scotland and across the UK and probably even across Europe, because that's the audience that we have at our disposal. So just to give you a little bit of about me. Energy Voice is very proud of its heritage. We've been around a little bit longer than we think as part of DC Thomson, and as a sister brand to the Press and Journal. And we're here because we think that the story is here about energy and the transition. Now, the Press and Journal has a tradition of serving this community, the Highlands and Islands, and Energy Voice wants to do the same. And what we want to do is, we can even give you stuff for free. You're more than welcome to sign up. There's a free subscription that you get a chance to, and if you email my lovely colleague, Kay Parsons-Bro at DC Thomson, she can totally sort you out with just some access. So you can kind of see what we do in terms of our news flow, the areas that we cover, and the insights that we take. And then, of course, any of you who are thinking that you're like to get more involved, a bit more hands-on, you can also join our new eForward community. And that brings together C-suite executives in the energy industry with leaders across finance and politics. And they're all working together to figure out the shape of a cleaner and secure energy system. Now, we're also, with the P&J, if you get a chance, there's a way that you can join the P&J corporate subscription program. And that is kind of a way for you to enable communities that the P&J serves to serve them. Because corporate subscriptions means that it supports the voice, it influences change, and it supplies your staff with a few extra kind of copies of the paper as well, which is awfully handy, of course, and access to the website. And then, you know, it gives you a chance to influence and ear to the ground, you know what's going on. And also, if you're here, you're signed up, you'll get an email telling you all about it. So that's pretty much me and my hard sell over. We're even closer to lunch. Thank you so much for your time. You've been a great audience. I've really enjoyed it. I love it up here. And thank you.
We've got quite a lot of people to thank, so you can save a little clap until the end if that's okay, and I can run through them nice and quickly. All of our speakers and panelists and our brilliant host, Willie Cameron, who's just left the room. Finding partners, BEVA, Green Power International and Low Carbon. Main sponsor, SSEN Transmission. Highland Tourism CIC founding sponsor, Tomatin Distillery. Premier sponsors, Statkraft, RES and 4EV Field, Haventus and Vattenfall, and Kane Media, Peter Kane as well. Energy Voice and Press and Journal, DC Thomson have done a great job of raising the profile of the conference for us today. Thanks very much. The board of directors of the CIC, and it was very remiss of me not to mention you, Chris. You had a couple of years supporting us on the board of directors, and I apologise for missing you off the announcement earlier. Chris, you've been a great energy to the board, and we really appreciate it, and we realise that you're moving on to do greater things in the Highlands. The Highland Renewables steering group, and a particular mention to Alison Hood of Statkraft, who's driving forward, and great support. The new conference delegates and all of our ambassadors, thanks very much. The Kings Mills Hotel and team, and to my CIC team at the back, Erin, Kathleen and Claire. I can't even tell you, I couldn't be here looking together today without you. And Innes Morgan, you've been a star of the day, and thanks very much. Thank you all very much, and a big round of applause if you don't mind.